Picture a person walking a large, powerful dog through a park. At a glance, the scene seems normal: a person and their companion. But if you watch for a moment longer, you begin to see the truth of the situation. The person is holding the leash, but they are not the one leading. The dog, driven by 1,000 impulses, is in complete control. It lunges after a squirrel, pulling the owner off balance. It barks aggressively at a passing stranger, creating a moment of tense conflict. It stops abruptly to sniff at a trivial scent, forcing the owner to an awkward halt. The person on the other end of the leash is not walking the dog, they are being walked. They are a passenger, dragged along on a chaotic and exhausting journey, dictated entirely by the whims of a creature they are supposedly in charge of. This scene, in a way, is a perfect portrait of the relationship that most of us have with our own minds. We believe we are in control. We believe we are the thinkers of our thoughts, the feelers of our emotions, the choosers of our actions. But if we look with honest, unflinching clarity, we often find that the opposite is true. Our mind, like the powerful dog, drags us wherever it wants to go. It lunges toward objects of desire, a fleeting pleasure, a material possession, a moment of validation. It runs in fear from the shadows of anxiety, pulling us into sleepless nights of worry. It barks with anger and judgment at people or ideas that it doesn't like. It gets endlessly distracted by the trivial sense of social media feeds, useless daydreams, and loops of old regret. We are yanked from the past to the future, from craving to aversion, rarely finding a moment of peace in the present. We have become slaves to our own inner chaos, reactors instead of actors, constantly being pulled by the leash of our own untamed thoughts and impulses. But what if it could be different? What if you could learn to be the calm, steady hand on the leash? What if you could transform that chaotic, reactive force into a focused, loyal, and powerful companion? This is the great promise of the world's wisdom traditions, and particularly of the Buddhist path. When we speak of controlling the mind, it is not a call for a harsh, brutal act of suppression. It is not about breaking the spirit of the mind or trying to chain it in a dark cellar. It is the compassionate and skillful art of taming. It is a process of patiently and wisely training the mind, understanding its nature, harnessing its incredible power, and directing that power not toward distraction and conflict, but toward clarity, peace, and purpose. It is about transforming your mind from a frantic, unruly master into a calm, devoted servant. This journey is about learning to pick up the leash, to call your mind home, and to walk together as true partners on the path of your own choosing. We begin with the image of a person being dragged, controlled by the chaotic impulses of an animal they believe they are leading. This is the first step in our journey of self-mastery, the honest recognition of our current condition. But to truly grasp the scale of the challenge and the magnitude of the potential reward, we must replace the image of the unruly dog with a metaphor that is far more ancient and far more potent. The Buddhist tradition compares the untamed mind not to a dog, but to a wild elephant. Imagine a magnificent, full-grown bull elephant roaming free in the jungle. It possesses an immense, almost unimaginable power. Its strength is colossal, its intelligence is keen, and its potential, if harnessed, is nearly limitless. This elephant is the raw, untamed power of your own mind. This section is about looking squarely at this creature that resides within each of us, to respectfully assess its nature, both in its awesome potential and in its capacity for terrifying destruction. First, we must honor the sheer power and beauty of this elephant. We must not make the mistake of seeing the mind as an enemy to be destroyed. The mind is the source of everything that is sublime and meaningful in human existence. It is the mind that composes symphonies, that writes poetry, that can move us to tears, that designs cathedrals that lift our spirits toward the heavens. It is the mind that formulates the laws of physics, allowing us to understand the cosmos, and that unlocks the secrets of medicine, allowing us to heal the body. It is the mind that gives rise to the warmth of love, the bond of friendship, and the profound empathy that allows us to connect with another's heart. Your mind, right now, holds the capacity for immense creativity, boundless compassion, and penetrating wisdom. It is a tool of near infinite potential. The entire spiritual path is not about weakening this powerful instrument, but about learning how to pick it up, how to understand it, and how to use it skillfully to create beauty and benefit, rather than chaos and harm. The power is neutral. The question is, who is in charge of it? When this immense power is left untrained, when there is no wise handler to guide it, it manifests not as a blessing, but as a curse. An untamed mind is a source of profound and relentless suffering. We experience this first as the phenomenon often called monkey mind. The mind, like a restless monkey, swings uncontrollably from one branch to another. It leaps from a memory of a past embarrassment, to a worry about a future meeting, to a judgment about a person walking past, to a fantasy about a vacation, all within the space of a few seconds. It never rests. It is a constant, chattering, inner monologue that leaves us feeling fragmented, scattered, and deeply exhausted at the end of the day, even if we have done nothing physical. This is the wild elephant, wandering aimlessly through the jungle of our psyche, trampling the delicate plants of peace and concentration wherever it steps. Then, when this untamed mind is provoked, its power turns from aimless wandering to active destruction. When we feel threatened, insulted, or frustrated, the elephant charges. We have all felt this. It is the blinding flash of rage that takes over, causing us to say things that are cruel, vicious, and irreparable. It is the surge of resentment that can poison a loving relationship for days or weeks. In these moments, we feel possessed. It is as if some other, more powerful creature has seized control of our body and voice. We look back on our actions later with shame and confusion, thinking, that wasn't the real me. But it was. It was the untamed elephant of the mind, maddened by a perceived threat, charging through the village of our life, smashing the fragile huts of our relationships and our own self-respect. Even when it is not charging, the untamed mind keeps us in a state of perpetual fog. It is a master of distraction. We sit down with the clear intention to work on an important project, and within minutes, the mind has dragged us away to check our email, to scroll through social media, to look up some trivial piece of information. We try to be present for our children, but the mind is replaying a conversation from work. We try to listen to our partner, but the mind is planning our rebuttal. We are constantly being led astray from our own deepest intentions. In all of these states, the restless monkey, the charging beast, the distracted wanderer, the underlying feeling is one of profound powerlessness. It is the unsettling realization that we are not the masters of our own inner house. We are living with a wild elephant, and we never know where it will go or what it will do next. The Buddha, with his deep understanding of human psychology, encapsulated this entire dynamic in the powerful parable of the wild elephant. Imagine, he said, a peaceful village nestled at the edge of a great jungle. The villagers live in harmony, tending to their fields and raising their families. But one day, a huge wild elephant, tormented by a wound or a maddening insect, stampedes out of the forest and into the village. It is a force of nature. In its confusion and rage, it tramples the carefully planted rice paddies, destroying the villagers' livelihood. It smashes through the walls of their homes, shattering their sense of security. It trumpets with a sound that strikes terror into their hearts. The villagers, with their small spears and nets, are powerless against it. They can only run and hide. This is our situation, our inner peace, our relationships, our best laid plans. These are the village, and the untamed mind is the wild elephant that, when agitated, can destroy it all. But the story does not end there. A wise and experienced elephant trainer comes to the village. The trainer does not approach the elephant with aggression. He does not try to meet the elephant's brute force with his own, for he knows he would be crushed. He uses intelligence and compassion. His first act is to get a single, very strong rope. This is the practice of mindfulness. His goal is to tie one end of the rope around the elephant and the other to a deep, firmly planted post. This post is the anchor of the present moment, our own body and breath. At first, the elephant is furious. It pulls and strains against the rope, trumpeting in rage for days. It exhausts itself trying to break free. The trainer simply waits, patiently. Slowly, the elephant begins to realize that its struggle is futile. It calms down. Now, the trainer can approach. He offers the elephant cool water and sweet sugar cane. These are the qualities of loving kindness and self-compassion we bring to our own mind. He speaks to it in a gentle, calming voice. He begins to study its ways, to understand what soothes it and what agitates it. Over time, a relationship of trust develops. The elephant is no longer a prisoner, but a partner. The trainer can now untie it from the post, and the elephant will follow his guidance. Its immense power, once a source of terror and destruction, now becomes a tremendous asset to the village. The elephant can help pull heavy logs to build new, stronger houses. It can help clear fallen trees from the roads after a storm. It can carry great loads, making the villagers' work easier. The very same creature that was once their greatest threat has now become their most powerful, most steadfast, and most loyal ally. This is the promise of the path. Your mind is this elephant. It is not your enemy. Its power is not something to be feared or destroyed. It is something to be understood, respected, and skillfully guided. The feeling of being out of control, of being a victim of your own moods, thoughts, and impulses, is the universal experience of living with the wild elephant. The path of practice is the path of the wise trainer. It is a journey that requires courage, patience, and great skill. It is the journey of transforming our greatest perceived liability into our most profound and trustworthy friend. To become a skillful trainer, we must first understand what maddens the elephant in the first place. What are the intoxicants, the thorns in its side, that provoke its destructive rampages? The Buddha identified 3 fundamental poisons that agitate the mind and fuel its unskillful tendencies. We must now turn our attention to these 3 great fires. We have come to see the untamed mind for what it is: a wild elephant, magnificent in its power, but terrifyingly destructive when left untrained. A wise trainer, before ever attempting to tame such a creature, would first seek to understand it. They would ask, what is causing its rage? What is the source of its frantic, aimless wandering? Is it a thorn in its foot? Is it a maddening sound? Is it an intoxicating substance it has consumed? To approach the elephant without understanding the cause of its agitation is to invite disaster. In the same way, to begin the process of taming our own mind, we must first clearly identify the forces that are fueling its chaos. The Buddha, acting as the ultimate physician of the mind, diagnosed 3 fundamental poisons or fires that constantly agitate, inflame, and disorient our consciousness. These are not external forces attacking us. They are internal fires that we ourselves feed, often unconsciously. To know them is the first step toward controlling them. They are the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. The first and most pervasive fire is lobha, which can be translated as greed, craving, clinging, or lust. This is the fire of insatiable wanting. It is the forward-leaning energy of the mind, the constant, restless impulse that says, "I need that to be happy." Its domain is vast. It is the craving for pleasant tastes, sounds, and physical sensations. It is the lust for power, fame, and status. It is the deep attachment to another person, to an idea, or to a particular outcome. It is the engine of the hedonic treadmill, forever promising that true satisfaction lies just around the corner, with the next purchase, the next promotion, the next relationship, the next experience. This craving is called a fire because it truly burns. When we are in a state of intense wanting, we are not at peace. The mind is agitated, consumed by the object of its desire. There is a palpable feeling of lack, of incompleteness, a burning thirst that demands to be quenched. We feed this fire every time we believe its promise. We get the thing we want, and for a moment, the flames die down, and we feel a fleeting pleasure. But the nature of this fire is that it is never truly satisfied. The embers of wanting continue to smolder, and very soon the fire demands more fuel, latching onto a new object. The person obsessed with wealth is not satisfied by their first million. The fire immediately demands a second. The person addicted to validation is not satisfied by one compliment. They immediately need another. The fire of greed consumes our time, our energy, and our attention, and in the end, it leaves us with nothing but the ash of exhaustion and continued dissatisfaction. It is the sweet-smelling fruit that lures the wild elephant deeper and deeper into the jungle, further and further away from the clear, open space of peace. The second fire, which burns with a hotter and more immediate intensity, is dosa. This is the fire of hatred, aversion, anger, and ill will. If greed is the energy of pulling toward, hatred is the energy of pushing away. It is the violent impulse to reject, resist, or destroy whatever is unpleasant. It ranges from the subtle flicker of impatience while waiting in line, to the simmering heat of resentment toward a colleague, to the explosive, destructive rage that shatters relationships. When this fire flares up, it completely consumes our awareness. Our perception narrows until the only thing we can see is the object of our anger. Our body floods with stress hormones, preparing us for a primal battle. In this state, our compassion and wisdom evaporate. We become the charging elephant, ready to trample anything in our path. We often believe that our anger is a source of power, a tool to protect ourselves or to correct an injustice. But from the perspective of our own inner well-being, it is a devastatingly corrosive flame. It is the hot coal that we pick up with the intention of throwing it at another. But in the process, we are the one who is being seared, holding onto a grudge, nursing a resentment, replaying an old hurt. These are acts of self-inflicted torture. The anger burns us. It damages our physical health. It creates an atmosphere of fear and tension around us, and it utterly destroys any possibility of inner peace. The fire of hatred may be aimed at an external target, but its true victim is always the one in whose heart it is allowed to burn. It is the sharp thorn lodged in the elephant's foot, the source of the pain that causes it to lash out blindly, destroying everything around it in a desperate attempt to relieve its own agony. The third fire is the most subtle, the most profound, and the most dangerous of all. It is the fire of moha, which means delusion or ignorance. This is not a lack of factual information or a low IQ. It is a fundamental, deep-seated misperception of the nature of reality. Moha is the dark, suffocating smoke that allows the other two fires to burn so brightly. It is the root poison, the underlying condition that makes the entire system of suffering possible. What does this delusion consist of? It is primarily the two great illusions we have already explored. First, it is the delusion of a solid, separate, and permanent. Self, the belief in the empty boat being a real, unchanging entity. Second, it is the delusion of permanence in the world around us, the belief that we can find lasting safety and happiness in fleeting conditions. Because we are shrouded in the smoke of moha, we cannot see things clearly. Because we mistakenly believe there is a solid me to protect and promote, we are constantly grasping for things to bolster it, greed, and lashing out at anything that threatens it, hatred. If we were free from the delusion of a separate self, who would there be to feel slighted? Who would there be to endlessly gratify? Because we mistakenly believe that a new car or a perfect relationship will bring lasting happiness, we chase after them, greed, and we become enraged when they inevitably fail to deliver or are taken away from us, hatred. If we could see with perfect clarity the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless nature of all things, the fuel for the fires of greed and hatred would be removed. We would see that chasing pleasure is like chasing a rainbow, and that holding on to anger is like drinking poison. Delusion is the foundational ignorance that keeps the wild elephant confused, unable to see the true path home, and thus easily agitated by the promise of pleasure or the sting of pain. Imagine your mind is a kitchen, and your life's work is to cook a simple, nourishing meal of peace and wisdom. The three fires are burning uncontrollably on the stove beneath the cooking pot. The fire of greed has turned the dial up to maximum, trying to force the meal to cook faster. The fire of hatred keeps throwing volatile chemicals and grease onto the flame, causing it to erupt in dangerous flare-ups. And the fire of delusion is the thick, black smoke filling the room, making it impossible for you to see the controls clearly or even to read the recipe. In this chaotic kitchen, you can never cook a wholesome meal. You will only ever burn the food and perhaps burn down the house. The first task of a master chef, of a wise trainer of the mind, is not to stir the pot more furiously. It is to learn to regulate the flames. We must learn to gently turn down the dial of greed. We must learn the techniques to safely extinguish the flare-ups of hatred. And most importantly, we must open a window to clear the suffocating smoke of delusion, so that we can finally see what we are truly working with. Now that we have identified these three fires that madden and torment the wild elephant of the mind, we are ready to take the next step. We are ready to pick up the first and most essential tool of the wise trainer. We need a way to approach this powerful, burning, and agitated creature without being consumed by its flames or trampled by its charge. We need a tool that is both strong and flexible. We need the reliable rope of mindfulness. We have stood before the wild elephant of the mind and looked unflinchingly at the three great fires that fuel its chaotic rampages: the insatiable fire of greed, the corrosive fire of hatred, and the suffocating smoke of delusion. We now understand what agitates this powerful creature within us. But understanding is not enough. To stand before a charging elephant armed only with an intellectual analysis of its anger is to be trampled. We need a tool. We need a practical method to begin the delicate and courageous process of taming. We cannot hope to overpower the elephant with brute force. Our willpower alone is no match for its raw, instinctual energy. We cannot reason with it while it is consumed by the flames of passion. The first step, as any wise trainer knows, is not to fight, but to contain. We need a way to create a safe space, to establish a boundary, so that we can begin to observe the elephant without being dragged away by its every whim. This primary tool, the strong, reliable, yet flexible rope offered by the Buddhist path, is the practice of sati, or mindfulness. Let us be very clear about the nature of this rope. Mindfulness is not a tool for yanking, choking, or violently subduing the mind. To use it in that way would only make the elephant more furious and more distrustful. Mindfulness is the art of holding the rope with a firm, steady, and gentle grip. It is the cultivated human capacity to pay attention, on purpose, in the present moment, and most importantly, non-judgmentally. It is the development of a calm, unwavering witness to our own inner experience. When we are mindful, we are no longer fused with the elephant's every mood and impulse. We take a step back and simply watch. When the elephant of the mind begins to feel the pull of greed, the mindful mind simply notes, there is wanting. The elephant is moving towards something sweet. When the elephant begins to stamp its foot in anger, the mindful mind notes, there is aversion. The elephant is feeling threatened. This non-judgmental quality is the secret to the entire practice. We are not saying, bad elephant for feeling angry, or stupid elephant for wanting that. To judge and condemn our own mental states is to whip the elephant, which only increases its fear and aggression. Instead, we adopt the patient, curious attitude of a naturalist studying a magnificent creature. We simply want to understand its habits. What triggers its fear? What soothes its agitation? What are its patterns? This clear, unbiased seeing is the very beginning of wisdom. It allows us to gather precious information about the inner workings of our own mind without getting caught up in its drama. It is the crucial difference between being the zookeeper, calmly observing the elephant from a safe enclosure, and being the terrified villager, running for their life from its charge. Now, a rope, no matter how strong, is useless if you have nothing to tie it to. If you simply hold the rope while standing on open ground, the elephant, with its immense strength, will still drag you wherever it pleases. The wise trainer knows they need to find a sturdy, deeply rooted post in the ground, something that will not yield. In the practice of taming the mind, our anchor post is the physical sensation of our own body, and most especially, the rhythm of our own breath. The breath is the perfect anchor for many reasons. It is always with us, from the moment of our birth to the moment of our death. It is always happening in the present moment. You cannot take a breath in the past or in the future. It is a neutral, rhythmic process, a bridge that intimately connects the world of the mind with the world of the body. To bring your attention to the breath is to bring your mind home. The formal practice, then, is the act of tying the rope of attention to the post of the breath. Find a comfortable position, sitting on a chair or a cushion, with your back upright, but not rigid, in a posture of relaxed dignity. You can gently close your eyes. Begin by bringing your awareness into your body. Feel the points of contact between your body and the chair, the feeling of your feet on the floor. Then, gently guide your attention to the physical, sensory experience of breathing. Choose one spot to rest your focus. Perhaps it is the tip of the nostrils, where you can feel the subtle coolness of the air entering and the slight warmth of the air leaving. Or perhaps it is the chest, feeling the gentle expansion and contraction. Or maybe it is the abdomen, noticing the soft rising on the in-breath and the gentle falling on the out-breath. There is no need to control the breath or change it in any way. Simply let your attention rest upon its natural, ceaseless rhythm. This is the act of tying the elephant to the post. For this moment, your mind is tethered, contained, and calm. But what happens next is the core of the entire training process. You have tied the powerful, wild elephant of the mind to the post of the breath. Almost immediately, the elephant will begin to pull. A thought will arise. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? The elephant is straining at the rope. A memory of a past conversation will appear. The elephant is yanking in another direction. A sound from outside will capture your attention. The elephant is charging toward a new distraction. Your mind will wander. This is not a sign of failure. It is not a mistake. This is simply the nature of the untamed elephant. It is what minds do. The most important moment in your entire practice is the moment you realize this has happened. The instant you wake up and think, "Oh, my mind has wandered away from the breath." That moment of recognition is mindfulness. That is the moment of victory. You have become aware of the elephant's movement. And what do you do in that moment? You do not scold the elephant. You do not get angry at yourself or frustrated with your bad meditation. You simply perform one gentle, compassionate, and firm action. You tug gently on the rope. You acknowledge where the mind has gone thinking, planning, remembering, and then you skillfully and kindly guide your attention right back to the anchor post of the breath. The mind will wander away again 100 times, 1,000 times, and with infinite patience, 1,000 times, you will gently guide it back. The training is not about the elephant standing perfectly still by the post from the very beginning. That is impossible. The training is the process of returning again and again and again. Each time you notice the mind has wandered and you gently bring it back, you are performing one repetition in the gymnasium of the mind. You are strengthening the muscle of attention. The rope becomes stronger. Your skill as a trainer increases. And the wild elephant, slowly, over time, begins to learn. It learns that struggling is exhausting and futile. It learns that a quiet peace can be found right here, by this steady post. It does not become weaker, it becomes calmer. Its wild, chaotic energy begins to settle, and its immense power becomes manageable. This is the foundational skill of all mental mastery. Mindfulness is the rope that allows us to create a space between our awareness and the chaotic impulses of the mind. It allows us to move from being a helpless victim of the wild elephant to becoming its potential trainer. It is the beginning of an entirely new relationship with ourselves, a relationship based not on fear and chaos, but on clarity, patience, and compassionate control. We have now taken hold of the rope and secured it to the anchor of the present moment. From this new, safer vantage point, we can begin to observe the elephant more closely, to notice the specific patterns and obstacles that arise during its training. As we watch, we see that it is repeatedly agitated and distracted by the same few troublemakers. These are known in the Buddhist tradition as the 5 hindrances, the primary agents of chaos on the path to a calm and controlled mind. We have now taken hold of the great rope of mindfulness and have tethered the wild elephant of the mind to the sturdy post of the present moment. For the first time, we have created a space. We are no longer being endlessly dragged through the jungle of our own thoughts. We have established a base camp for observation. As we sit in this newfound, relative stillness, holding the rope, we begin to notice the elephant's patterns more clearly. We see that its agitation is not entirely random. There are specific, recurring troublemakers that spook it, that lure it away, that make it drowsy, or that cause it to doubt the entire training process. It is as if a small group of saboteurs keeps sneaking into the training ground to disrupt our work. In the Buddhist tradition, these 5 primary disruptive energies are known as the 5 hindrances. They are the mind's great agents of chaos, the internal obstacles that cloud our clarity and cut the rope of our concentration. To become a skillful trainer of the mind, we must become intimately familiar with these 5 troublemakers. We must learn their names, their disguises, and their tactics, so that when they appear, we can recognize them immediately and are no longer fooled by their tricks. The Buddha used a beautiful and practical metaphor to describe the effect of these hindrances. He compared a clear, calm, and concentrated mind to a bowl of pure, still water sitting in a well-lit room. In this water, you can see your own reflection perfectly, with absolute clarity. You can see things just as they are. Each of the 5 hindrances is a different way in which this clear water can be contaminated. making it impossible to see our true reflection. The first hindrance is kamakanda, or sensual desire. This is the mind being hijacked by a craving for a pleasant experience through one of the five senses, or through fantasy in the mind. In our metaphor, this is like someone pouring brightly colored dyes into the bowl of water. The water is suddenly a swirl of vibrant red or a deep, cloudy blue. It might be beautiful and alluring, but the water is no longer clear. We can no longer see our own reflection. We see only the color of our desire. This happens in our meditation when our attention is suddenly carried away by a fantasy about a delicious meal, a sexual encounter, a comfortable nap, or the memory of a pleasant vacation. Our mind leaves the present moment entirely and goes to live in that world of imagined pleasure. It creates a state of restlessness, a leaning forward energy, a feeling that what is here now is not good enough, and that happiness lies elsewhere. The skillful response is not to get angry at the desire, but to see it for what it is. We mindfully note, desire is present or wanting. We see it as a colored dye, and by seeing it clearly, we resist the urge to stir it into the entire bowl. We simply let it be, and like all impermanent things, its color will eventually fade, and the water can become clear again. The second hindrance is vyapada, or ill will. This encompasses the entire spectrum of aversion, from mild irritation and impatience to simmering resentment and outright hatred. This is the mind at war with reality, rejecting what is present. In our metaphor, this is like putting the bowl of water on a blazing fire. The water begins to boil and bubble violently. Its surface is completely agitated. In this churning, roiling state, a clear reflection is impossible. This is what our mind feels like when we are caught in anger. We are consumed by the heat of our own negativity. We replay arguments in our head. We nurse grudges. We fantasize about revenge. The mind is tense, contracted, and aggressive. The clear seeing of wisdom is impossible. The primary antidote to the fire of ill will is the cooling water of metta, or loving kindness. When we notice this hindrance arising, we can intentionally introduce thoughts of goodwill. We can offer kindness first to ourselves, to soothe the pain that is always at the root of anger. We can then try to extend that kindness outwards, even towards the person or situation that is the object of our aversion, recognizing that they too are suffering. This practice actively reduces the heat and allows the water of the mind to settle. The third hindrance is thinamida, or sloth and torpor. This is a state of mental and physical heaviness, dullness, and drowsiness. It is a sinking feeling, a lack of energy, a closing down of awareness. This is not just the simple physical tiredness that comes from a lack of sleep. It is a specific mental state of fogginess and inertia. In our metaphor, this is like the bowl of water becoming overgrown with a thick layer of algae and weeds. The surface is stagnant and murky. The light of awareness cannot penetrate its depths. When sloth and torpor are present, the mind feels unworkable. The intention to practice is weak, and the temptation to simply give up and fall asleep is very strong. This hindrance requires an active generation of energy. We may need to do something physical, like standing up, stretching, or gently splashing our face with cool water. We can also apply mental antidotes. We can reflect on the preciousness and rarity of this human life, and the importance of using our time wisely. We can bring to mind an inspiring teacher or story. We can arouse our interest by focusing on a new, more subtle aspect of the breath. The goal is to introduce light and fresh air into the stagnant, murky water. The fourth hindrance is udaka kukuka, or restlessness and worry. This is the hyperactive monkey mind in its classic form. Restlessness, udaka, is the mind that cannot settle down. It is like a shaken snow globe, with thoughts flitting and jumping from one topic to another without ever landing. It is a state of agitation and distractedness. Worry and regret, kukucha, is the specific flavor of restlessness that is obsessed with the past or the future. The mind spins in anxious loops about what might go wrong, or in remorseful loops about what has already gone wrong. In our metaphor, this hindrance is like a strong wind, constantly blowing across the surface of the bowl of water. The wind creates countless ripples, waves, and disturbances, shattering our reflection into 1,000 distorted, unrecognizable fragments. The primary antidote here is the patient and persistent practice of returning. Again and again, we guide the attention back to the anchor of the breath. We can also try grounding our awareness more firmly in the body, feeling the solid sensations of our feet on the floor or the weight of our hands in our lap. This gives the shaken snow globe of the mind a chance to settle, for the winds to die down, and for the surface of the water to become placid and clear once more. The fifth and final hindrance is vichikicha, or skeptical doubt. It is important to distinguish this from the healthy, investigative doubt of a scientist, which is essential on the spiritual path. This hindrance is a paralyzing, cynical, and unconstructive form of doubt. It is the whispering voice of inner conflict that undermines our practice. Can I really do this? Am I wasting my time? Maybe this whole mindfulness thing doesn't work. Maybe my teacher is wrong. It is a state of inner indecision and mistrust that saps our motivation and leaves us feeling stuck. In our metaphor, this is like placing the bowl of water in a dark room and then stirring a handful of mud into it. The water is now murky and opaque, and even if it were clear, there is not enough light to see a reflection anyway. The antidote to skeptical doubt can be to borrow clarity from an external source, to read an inspiring book, to listen to a talk from a trusted teacher, or to speak with a friend who is also on the path. But the most powerful antidote is to gently suspend the intellectual debate and return to the direct experience of the practice itself. We can mindfully note the doubt as just doubting, another mental event, and then patiently return to the breath. We choose to trust the process, one moment at a time, rather than getting lost in the muddy water of endless intellectualization. These 5 hindrances are the primary troublemakers, the saboteurs of our peace. By learning to name them and recognize their distinct flavors, we take away their power to fool us. We see that they are not me or mine. They are impersonal, transient weather patterns that move through the mind. They are the predictable ways the wild elephant resists its training. Knowing our adversaries is the first, crucial step in any skillful endeavor, but a successful trainer knows that taming the mind is not just a defensive game of dealing with problems. It is also a proactive and creative process. It is not enough to simply not be sick. One must also actively cultivate health. This brings us to the joyful work of the wise gardener of the mind, who knows not only how to identify and pull the weeds, but also how to plant and nurture the flowers of well-being. We have now stood at the gates of our mind and identified the 5 great troublemakers, the hindrances that sneak in to disrupt our peace and sabotage our efforts to find clarity. We have learned to recognize the vibrant dye of sensual desire, the boiling water of ill will, the stagnant algae of sloth and torpor, the agitating winds of restlessness, and the murky mud of doubt. A purely defensive strategy would be to spend all of our time and energy simply guarding against these intruders. While this is a necessary part of the training, it is only half of the equation. A truly flourishing life is not built merely on the absence of the negative. It is built on the active and joyful cultivation of the positive. A beautiful garden is not just a space that is free of weeds. It is a space that has been intentionally and lovingly planted with flowers that offer beauty and vegetables that offer nourishment. This brings us to a more active and creative stage of our practice. We must move from being a mere security guard of the mind to becoming its wise and dedicated gardener. This is the heart of the teaching on right effort, the conscious, proactive, and joyful work of cultivating a beautiful mind. Let us develop this powerful metaphor of the mind as a garden. Your mind, right now, is a plot of incredibly fertile soil. Its fundamental nature is to grow things. If you leave a plot of fertile earth untended, something will inevitably grow. But what will it be? The seeds that are already latent in the soil and the seeds that are blown in by the wind will be the ones to take root. In the case of our minds, the latent seeds are our deep-seated, conditioned, habit-sour tendencies toward anger, anxiety, and greed. The seeds blown in on the wind are the messages of our culture, messages that often encourage comparison, consumerism, and conflict. If we are passive gardeners, if we simply neglect our inner landscape, a thick and thorny jungle of these weeds will surely grow, choking out any possibility of light or peace. This is the untamed mind. The practice of mind control, therefore, is the noble art of conscious gardening. It requires that we show up in our garden every day. It demands that we learn to distinguish a useless weed from a nourishing plant. And it calls on us to make active, deliberate choices about what we want to cultivate in this precious, fertile ground of our own consciousness. It is the moment we decide to take responsibility for the state of our inner world. The Buddhist path provides a wonderfully practical framework for this kind of mental gardening. It is called the Four Right Efforts, a four-step handbook for the wise gardener. The first of these efforts is to prevent unwholesome states from arising. This is the work of guarding the gates of your garden. It means becoming mindful of what you are allowing into your mind through your senses. Before you plant new seeds, you inspect them. Likewise, we must inspect what we consume. What kinds of conversations do we engage in? Are they based on gossip and complaint, which plant seeds of negativity? Or are they based on understanding and kindness? What kind of media do we consume? Are we endlessly scrolling through content that makes us feel envious, inadequate, or angry? Or are we choosing to read, watch, and listen to things that are uplifting, educational, and inspiring? This is not about censorship or puritanism. It is about recognizing that everything we take in becomes a seed. Skillful gardening begins with choosing good seeds. The second effort is to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. This is the essential work of weeding. No matter how vigilant we are, weeds will still appear in the garden. Thoughts of resentment, jealousy, greed, and self-pity will sprout. The untrained mind either lets these weeds grow until they take over, or it tries to violently rip them out, often disturbing the soil and harming the surrounding plants. The wise gardener works skillfully. When you notice a weeder, persistent thought of anger towards someone, for example, you don't have to fight it directly. One of the most effective techniques is the principle of replacement. You gently uproot the thought of anger and, in its place, you intentionally plant a thought of loving kindness. You can bring to mind one good quality about that person, or simply wish for them to be happy. When a thought of stinginess or greed arises, you can consciously bring to mind the joy of generosity, perhaps remembering a time you gave a gift and the good feeling it produced. By consistently replacing the unwholesome with the wholesome, you not only remove the weed, but you also enrich the soil, making it less likely for that particular kind of weed to grow back. The third effort is to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the joyful work of planting new, beautiful seeds. This is a proactive choice. We don't wait for feelings of kindness or gratitude to just happen to us. We actively cultivate them. This can be done through formal meditation practices, such as the practice of metta, where we intentionally radiate goodwill to ourselves and others. It can be done through the simple daily practice of keeping a gratitude journal, writing down 3 or 4 things from your day for which you feel genuinely thankful. It can be the practice of consciously looking for the good in other people, rather than focusing on their flaws. Or it can be the simple act of reading a poem, listening to a piece of music, or spending time in nature, any activity that you know reliably plants seeds of peace, awe, and beauty in your mind. This is the creative, generative aspect of the path, where we become active artists of our inner landscape. The fourth and final effort is to maintain and nurture the wholesome states that have already arisen. This is the practice of tending to the young sprouts. When a moment of genuine peace, joy, or compassion arises in your mind, either spontaneously or through your practice, the tendency can be to just ignore it and move on. The wise gardener, however, knows that a young sprout needs care and attention. When you feel a moment of calm, savor it. Pay attention to what it feels like in your body. When you feel a surge of love or gratitude, let it fill you. Acknowledge it with a mental note. This is so wholesome. May this grow. By giving your mindful attention to these positive states, you are giving them the sunlight and water they need to grow strong. Over time, these small sprouts will grow into mighty trees and beautiful, fragrant flowers, and they will become the dominant features of your inner garden, naturally crowding out the space for weeds to grow. A simple and powerful Native American parable encapsulates this entire teaching. An old Cherokee chief is teaching his grandson about life. He says, "A great fight is going on inside me. It is a terrible fight, and it is between 2 wolves. One wolf is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, lies, false pride, and ego. The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thinks about it for a minute, and then asks his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old chief simply replies, "The one you feed." This is the essence of right effort. We are not helpless spectators of this inner battle. We are the ones in charge of the food supply. Every moment of our lives, we are making a choice about which wolf to feed. When we indulge in angry gossip, we are feeding the evil wolf. When we choose to forgive, we are feeding the good wolf. When we consume media that makes us feel greedy and envious, we are feeding the evil wolf. When we practice gratitude, we are feeding the good wolf. The state of our mind, the very texture of our life, is the direct result of these countless, small feeding choices we make every single day. The path of mind control is the conscious and deliberate process of learning to nourish the good wolf and to starve the evil one. This practice transforms our relationship with ourselves. We are no longer victims of a chaotic mind. We become empowered and responsible gardeners of our own hearts. It is a hopeful, creative, and deeply satisfying work. To consciously choose to cultivate a garden of peace, kindness, and clarity within oneself is the most generous gift we can offer to ourselves and to everyone we meet. A skilled gardener knows that some tasks, like turning heavy soil or cutting thick branches, require sharp and powerful tools. To work most effectively in our inner garden, we must learn to sharpen a key mental tool. We need to develop the power of deep, unshakable focus. This brings us to the crucial practice of cultivating concentration. We have taken on the noble role of the gardener of the mind. We have learned to identify the weeds of our unwholesome thoughts and to consciously plant the flowers of kindness, generosity, and wisdom. This is the proactive, creative work of right effort, the process of shaping our inner world into a place of beauty and peace. But any experienced gardener will tell you that to cultivate a garden effectively, to turn the hard soil, to pull deep-rooted weeds, and to prune strong branches, you need good tools. To work with a flimsy trowel or a blunt spade is to make the work 10 times harder and far less effective. In the same way, as we undertake the profound work of transforming our own consciousness, we need to ensure that our primary tool, the mind itself, is strong, stable, and sharp. It is not enough to simply have good intentions. We must forge an instrument capable of carrying out those intentions effectively. This brings us to the crucial practice of cultivating samadhi, or deep concentration. This is the art of sharpening the axe of the mind, transforming it from a blunt, clumsy instrument into a tool of incredible power, precision, and penetrating clarity. In our modern world, we often think of concentration as the everyday focus we use to read a book or to work on a spreadsheet. But samadhi refers to something much deeper, more unified, and more powerful. The ordinary, untrained mind is in a state of constant dissipation. Its energy is scattered in 1,000 different directions at once. It is like a standard light bulb, which emits light, but in a diffuse, unfocused way that illuminates very little with any real intensity. A concentrated mind, a mind cultivated in samadhi, is like a laser. It gathers all of that same scattered energy and unifies it into a single, coherent, powerful beam. A light bulb cannot cut through steel. A laser can. This is the kind of power we are cultivating in the mind. Not a power for aggression, but a power for insight. A power to cut through the illusions and confusion that keep us trapped in suffering. How is this state developed? It is the natural fruit of our mindfulness practice, sustained over time. As we have seen, the basic practice of mindfulness is to notice when the mind has wandered from its anchored breath and to gently guide it back. Samadhi is what begins to happen as we do this thousands and thousands of times. The mind, like a trained animal, learns to stay with the object for longer and longer periods. The frantic pull of distractions weakens. The inner chatter subsides. The mind becomes less like a restless monkey and more like a loyal cat, content to sit quietly, fully present, alert, and at ease. This state of collected, unified consciousness is samadhi. It is a state of profound inner stillness that is simultaneously energized and peaceful. It is the mind made workable, ready to be applied to the deepest questions of our existence. The importance of this preparatory work is perfectly illustrated by the parable of the two woodcutters. One morning, two woodcutters are tasked with felling a large tree. The first woodcutter is filled with a restless ambition. He grabs his axe and immediately begins to attack the tree, swinging with all his might. But his axe is dull. With each powerful swing, he expends enormous energy, sweating and grunting, yet the blade only makes a small, jagged dent in the tough bark. He becomes more and more frustrated, blaming the tree for being too hard, blaming the weather, blaming his own lack of strength. His work is a picture of exhausting, inefficient, and frustrating struggle. The second, wiser woodcutter, however, does not immediately approach the tree. He sits down calmly on a nearby stump, takes out a whetstone, and begins to patiently sharpen his axe. The first woodcutter might look over and mock him, thinking, "What a lazy fool. He is wasting precious time while I am already working hard." But the wise woodcutter is not wasting time. He is investing it. He works with mindful, patient attention, drawing the blade across the stone again and again until it has a razor-sharp, gleaming edge. Only then does he stand up and approach the tree. His swings are not frantic or furious. They are calm, efficient, and precise. With each swing, the perfectly sharpened blade bites deep into the wood, sending large chips flying. In a fraction of the time, and with a fraction of the effort, he accomplishes the task. The tree falls, Meanwhile, the first woodcutter is still hacking away, exhausted, frustrated, and having made very little progress. In this story, the great tree is the deep-rooted suffering in our own lives, our most stubborn habits, our deepest fears, our most painful traumas. The dull axe is the scattered, anxious, untrained mind. To try and solve our most profound problems with this kind of mind is the work of the first woodcutter. It is exhausting, frustrating, and largely ineffective. We just create more jagged wounds. The practice of concentration, meditation, the patient, quiet work of sitting and returning our attention to the breath again and again is the act of sharpening the axe. To an outside observer, or even to our own impatient ego, it can seem like we are doing nothing. But this quiet, internal work is the most crucial and productive thing we can do. It is the necessary preparation for all other meaningful work. The path of developing samadhi is a gradual process of calming the mind and unifying its scattered energies. As we rest our attention on the breath, we are actively starving the 5 hindrances. When the mind is truly with the breath, it is not chasing sensual desires. It is not boiling with ill will. It is not sinking into sloth, agitated by restlessness, or paralyzed by doubt. One by one, the flames that disturb the mind are deprived of their fuel. The water in the bowl becomes progressively more still. In the classical texts, this deepening stillness is described in stages known as the jhanas, or meditative absorptions. As concentration deepens, the internal chatter of the thinking mind begins to fall away. This is followed by the arising of the joyful energy of piti, which we have already discussed. As the mind becomes even more stable, this energetic joy settles into the deep, serene contentment of sukha. Finally, all of these subtler movements of the mind come to rest in a state of profound, unshakable equanimity, a state of perfect, unified stillness, where the mind is both supremely peaceful and brilliantly alert. Why do we undertake this training? The power of a concentrated mind yields 2 great benefits. The first is for the sake of deep insight, or panna. A concentrated mind becomes a tool of immense scientific power, like a high-powered microscope. With this stable and clear instrument, we can turn our attention to the nature of our own experience. We can look at a thought, a feeling, or even the sense of self, and see it with unprecedented clarity. We can see its impermanence, its conditional nature, its inherent lack of a solid core. This direct seeing is what liberates the mind. A scattered mind is simply incapable of perceiving these subtle truths. Concentration creates the stable platform upon which the building of wisdom can be constructed. The second benefit is for our daily lives. This mental mastery is not just for the meditation cushion. A person who has cultivated concentration brings that quality into everything they do. They are more present in their conversations, able to listen deeply without being distracted. They are more effective in their work, able to focus on one task at a time and complete it with excellence. They are more resilient in the face of crisis, able to remain calm and clear-headed when others are panicking. The ability to place your mind where you want it, for as long as you want it, is a genuine superpower. In our age of endless distraction, to cultivate concentration is to undertake the most important craftsmanship of all, the forging of our own consciousness. It is the act of transforming the mind from a blunt, clumsy, and unreliable tool into a precision instrument of incredible strength and beauty. It is the essential sharpening that makes the difficult work of uprooting our suffering not only possible, but inevitable. With this newly sharpened tool in our hands, we are no longer intimidated by the hard work of the garden. We are properly equipped, and we can now approach even the most volatile and dangerous of our inner fires with confidence and skill. We can now learn to work with the explosive energy of anger, not as victims of its heat, but as wise firefighters of the heart. With the axe of our mind now sharpened by the steady practice of concentration, we are prepared to do the hard work. We have cultivated a mind that is calm, focused, and workable. We are now properly equipped to approach one of the most powerful and dangerous forces in our inner wilderness, the blazing fire of anger. Of all the mental states that can hijack our consciousness, anger, or dosa, is perhaps the most volatile and destructive. In a single, unguarded moment, a flash of rage can incinerate years of trust in a relationship, scar a child's heart, or ruin a career. It is the wild elephant on a full-blown rampage, a fire that, once out of control, consumes everything in its path, leaving behind only the ash of regret and broken connections. The path of mind mastery is not about pretending this fire doesn't exist or trying to suppress its heat with sheer force, an effort that is bound to fail. Instead, it offers us the skillful, courageous, and compassionate path of the master firefighter roan who does not fear the flame, but understands its nature and knows exactly how to douse it before it spreads. First, we must reframe our entire understanding of anger. We typically see it in one of two ways, either as a shameful and terrifying emotion that we must crush and deny within ourselves, or as a righteous and powerful force that validates our position and gives us the strength to fight injustice. The Buddhist perspective offers a middle way. It sees anger at its root as simply a powerful, raw, and neutral energy. Like fire itself, it is not inherently good or evil. A fire can be used to cook a nourishing meal and warm a house on a cold night, or it can be used to burn that house to the ground. The energy is the same. The outcome depends entirely on how it is handled. Anger almost always arises as a secondary reaction, second arrow. The first arrow is a feeling of being hurt, of being threatened, of being afraid, or of perceiving an injustice. The anger is the mind's primitive and powerful defense strategy against that initial pain. It's a shield that we throw up, but it is a shield made of fire, one that invariably ends up burning the one who wields it. By understanding anger as a misguided, protective energy rather than a moral failing, we can begin to approach it with a sense of curiosity and compassion, rather than with fear or self-condemnation. To work with this fire skillfully, we need a clear protocol, a firefighter's step-by-step emergency plan that we can train ourselves to deploy the moment we feel the heat. The first and most critical step is mindful recognition. This is the fire alarm. Before we can do anything about a fire, we must first know that it has started. We must train ourselves to become incredibly sensitive to the physical and mental signals of anger's arrival. Pay close attention to your body. What does the beginning of anger feel like? For many, it's a sudden heat that rises in the chest and face. The jaw clenches, the fists subtly tighten, the breath becomes short and shallow, the heart begins to beat faster. These are the body's alarm bells. The moment you notice these sensations, your practice is to mentally and calmly label what is happening. Anger is here. I feel heat in my chest. My hands are clenched. This simple act of naming is profoundly powerful. It creates a sliver of space between your awareness and the raw emotion. You are no longer 100% possessed by the anger. A small part of you has stepped back and become the observer, the calm fire dispatcher who has just received an emergency call. The second step, and perhaps the most important intervention, is to stop adding fuel to the fire. Anger does not sustain itself in a vacuum. It requires a constant supply of fuel, and that fuel is the self-righteous stories we tell ourselves in our heads. The moment the physical sensation of anger arises, the mind immediately begins to construct a narrative to justify and amplify it. How dare they speak to me like that? They have no respect. I am completely in the right here. This is unacceptable. They always do this kind of thing. Each one of these thoughts is like throwing another log or even a can of gasoline onto the initial spark. The practice here is to use our mindfulness to see these stories for what they are, just thoughts. They are not objective reality. They are biased, one-sided interpretations designed to vindicate our ego. The instruction is to consciously refuse to engage with the storyline. You see the angry thoughts bubbling up, and you let them bubble up and pass without grabbing onto them, without believing them, and without elaborating on them. You simply let the narrative run out of fuel. You are choosing to stop feeding the flame. The third step, once the fire is contained and no longer being actively fed, is to apply the antidote. You cannot fight fire with more fire. You must apply its opposite. The direct antidote to the burning heat of aversion and ill will is the cooling water of metta, or loving kindness. Now, this can feel like the most difficult and counterintuitive thing to do. When you are angry at someone, the last thing you want to do is wish them well. But this is not done for their benefit. It is done for yours. It is the most effective way to extinguish the painful fire in your own heart. The practice involves shifting your perspective. You can reflect that the person who has harmed you is acting from their own place of suffering. Happy, peaceful, and contented people do not go around causing harm. Their hurtful actions are a product of their own wild elephant, their own confusion, their own pain. From this place, you can try, as an experiment, to offer a simple wish. May you be free from the suffering that is causing you to act in this way. This is not about condoning their behavior. It is a pragmatic and compassionate strategy to cool your own inner state. You are choosing to douse the flames with the water of a larger understanding, rather than letting them burn you from the inside out. The fourth and final step is to transform the remaining energy. After the flames have died down, a great deal of heat and energy remains. This is valuable energy that can be put to good use. If your anger was sparked by a genuine injustice, this remaining calm, focused energy can be channeled into wise, strategic, and compassionate action to help right that wrong. It is the difference between a chaotic mob and an effective, organized movement for change. If the anger arose from a personal conflict, the energy can be used to initiate calm, clear, and honest communication with the goal of mutual understanding rather than of winning. The initial, destructive energy of the fire is not wasted. It is transformed into a powerful and useful tool for skillful engagement with the world. We can think of this entire process through the parable of the burning house. Imagine you are asleep and you wake to the smell of smoke. You realize your house is on fire. The foolish person, the one with an untrained mind, panics. They might run around screaming, "My house is burning. This is a disaster. Why is this happening to me?" Their panic is useless and accomplishes nothing. Or they might get angry at the fire and, in a fit of rage, grab a can of gasoline from the garage and throw it on the blaze, thinking they can somehow scare the fire into submission. This is what we do when we meet anger with more anger, when we pour our self-righteous stories onto the initial spark. The wise person, the one who has trained their mind, embodies the skill of the firefighter. They feel the jolt of fear, but they do not panic. Their training kicks in. First, they calmly assess the situation, identifying the source and size of the fire, mindful recognition. Second, they know the cardinal rule: never add fuel. They grab their family and get them to safety, removing the most precious things from the fire's path, cutting off the storyline. Third, they locate the fire extinguisher or the water hose, the antidote of compassion. And fourth, they apply the water calmly and systematically to the base of the flames, where it will be most effective, constructive action. They don't just spray wildly, they act with precision and purpose. They transform a potential catastrophe into a manageable problem. Having sharpened our mind and developed a strategy to handle the explosive fire of anger, we now turn to its seductive and equally powerful counterpart. It is a force that does not burn with heat, but threatens to drown us in its overwhelming current. It is the great flood of desire. In the Buddhist tradition, this is known as tanha, which literally translates to thirst. It is the deep, nagging, and pervasive feeling of lack, the inner voice that constantly whispers, "If only I had that, then I would be happy." It is the engine behind the fire of greed, the fundamental craving that pulls the untamed elephant of the mind from one object to the next in a restless, never-ending search for satisfaction. To control the mind, we must learn to navigate this powerful flood. We cannot simply build a dam to stop it. The river of life's energies is too powerful. Instead, we must learn to become skillful sailors, able to read the currents, ride the waves, and steer our vessel with wisdom, rather than being swept away into the rapids of attachment and disappointment. To begin, we must understand the full breadth and depth of this thirst. It is not just the simple wanting of a new car or a delicious meal. The Buddha described 3 distinct types of tanha that permeate almost all of our unexamined experience. The first, and most obvious, is kama tanha, the craving for sense pleasures. This is the thirst for our eyes to see beautiful things, our ears to hear pleasant sounds, our nose to smell fragrant scents, our tongue to taste delicious flavors, and our body to feel comfortable and pleasurable sensations. This is the driving force behind our consumer culture, our addictions to food, entertainment, and substances, and the endless search for the next exciting experience that will give us a temporary high. It is the belief that happiness can be found through stimulation of our senses. The second type is more subtle and psychological. It is bhavatanya, the craving for existence or becoming. This is the deep thirst of the ego to solidify, expand, and perpetuate itself. It is the craving to be something, to be successful, to be famous, to be respected, to be seen as intelligent or virtuous, even the craving to become enlightened. It is the endless project of self-improvement that is driven not by genuine wisdom, but by a gnawing sense of inadequacy. It is the voice that says, "I am not enough as I am. I will only be worthy when I become that better version of myself." This craving for a future, idealized identity keeps us in a constant state of striving, unable to rest in the peace of our own being as it is right now. The third type is the flip side of the coin, vibhavatanya, the craving for non-existence. This is the thirst for something to go away, the desire for annihilation. In its milder forms, it is the intense wish for an unpleasant feeling, like anxiety or boredom, to disappear immediately. It is the desire to escape from a difficult situation at work or in a relationship. In its most extreme form, it is the craving for self-destruction, the belief that the only way to end suffering is to end existence itself. This craving for absence is just as much a state of thirst as the craving for presence. It is a violent rejection of reality, a powerful expression of aversion. Together, these 3 streams of thirst, the pull toward pleasure, the drive to become, and the push away from pain, create the powerful, turbulent river that constantly threatens to pull our untamed mind under. The central problem with trying to quench this thirst by drinking from the river of the world is perfectly captured in the parable of the thirsty man and the salt water. Imagine a man, shipwrecked and adrift on a small raft in the middle of a vast ocean. He has gone for days without fresh water, and he is tormented by a raging, agonizing thirst. He is surrounded by water, endless water, as far as the eye can see. In his delirium and desperation, he decides to do the only thing he can think of. He cups his hands, scoops up the clear, cool ocean water, and drinks it deeply. For a single, fleeting moment, the coolness in his throat feels like heavenly relief. But almost immediately, the intense saltiness of the water begins to have its effect. Instead of hydrating him, it begins to pull the remaining fresh water out of his cells. His initial thirst, instead of being quenched, returns with a vengeance, now a burning fire in his throat. Panicked, he drinks more, and the cycle repeats. Each drink providing a moment of imagined relief, followed by an even more intense and agonizing thirst. This is the horrifying feedback loop that leads him to madness and death. This is a precise analogy for our relationship with craving. Our inner feeling of lack, our spiritual thirst, is real. Indulging in the objects of our desire, the worldly pleasures and ego gratifications, is like drinking salt water. It seems like the logical solution, and it provides a momentary hit of pleasure, but it ultimately intensifies the underlying thirst. It reinforces the habit of seeking happiness outside of ourselves. The wise person, adrift on the ocean of life, understands this. They know that drinking the salt water is a trap. Instead, they conserve their energy. They patiently watch the sky, looking for a dark rain cloud. They scan the horizon, looking for the green smudge of land that might hold a freshwater spring. They know that true, lasting relief will not come from the ocean that surrounds them, but from a different source altogether. This source of fresh water is the inner joy and contentment that we cultivate through our practice, a happiness that is not dependent on the salt water of external conditions. So, how do we practice this wisdom when the great waves of desire arise in our minds? The goal is not to suppress the wave, which is an impossible and exhausting fight. The goal is to learn how to surf it. This desire surfing is a skill developed through mindfulness. The first step is mindful recognition. The moment you feel the pull of a strong desire for a particular food, for a new gadget, to check your phone, instead of immediately acting on it, you pause. You take a breath, and you simply name what is happening. Wanting has arisen. This is the feeling of craving. You are not judging it as bad. You are simply identifying it with clarity. This creates a crucial space between the impulse and your action. Second, you investigate the physical sensation. Rather than getting swept up in the mental story and fantasy about how wonderful it would be to get the thing you want, you shift your attention to your body. How does this desire actually feel as a raw physical energy? Is it a tightness in your stomach? A tension in your shoulders? A hollow feeling in your chest? An energetic buzzing? By focusing on the raw sensation, you unhook yourself from the alluring narrative that gives the desire its power. You are no longer lost in the movie. You are just watching the electricity that powers the projector. Third, you watch the wave. Now, with this detached curiosity, you simply observe the desire as an impermanent event. You watch the wave of energy build. You feel it crest and reach its peak intensity. And then, if you continue to watch without feeding it with your thoughts or actions, you will witness something miraculous. You will see it begin to lose its energy. It will start to subside, and eventually, it will pass away, all on its own. Every time you successfully ride out a wave of desire in this way, you are profoundly retraining your mind. You are proving to yourself, through direct experience, that a craving is just a temporary event, not a command that must be obeyed. You are weakening the chains of habit and addiction. Finally, you can bring in the element of wise reflection. You can contemplate the object of your desire and ask yourself, if I get this, will it truly bring me lasting happiness? Or will it just lead to more wanting? Have I not had this experience before? You can recall past instances where you got exactly what you wanted and honestly remember how fleeting the pleasure was. This contemplation brings the clarity of wisdom to bear on the raw energy of the craving. It is not about telling yourself no like a stern parent. It is about gently reminding yourself of a truth you already know deep down, that this salt water cannot quench your thirst. To master desire is not to become a joyless ascetic, living a life devoid of pleasure. On the contrary, it is the only way to experience true freedom and true enjoyment. When you are no longer a slave to your cravings, you can appreciate the pleasant things in life as they come, without the desperate clinging that turns pleasure into a source of anxiety. You are free to enjoy the taste of a good meal without being obsessed by it. You are free to enjoy the company of another without being possessive. You are moving from being the desperate man on the raft, dying of thirst, to being the wise sailor who knows where the freshwater springs of the heart can be found. We have now learned to work with the explosive fire of anger and the overwhelming flood of desire. These are both very active, high-energy states of mind. But what about the opposite condition? What happens when the mind is not agitated and overwhelmed, but instead sinks into a thick, heavy, and immobilizing fog? We must now turn our attention to the subtle but powerful obstacle of sloth, torpor, and procrastination. We have now faced the great, dynamic energies of the mind. We have learned to work with the explosive fire of anger and to skillfully navigate the overwhelming flood of desire. These are high-energy states, dramatic and easy to identify as problems, but now we face an adversary that is far more subtle yet equally dangerous. It is not a raging fire or a crashing wave. It is a thick, heavy, suffocating fog that descends upon the mind, or a patch of sticky quicksand that pulls us down into inaction. This is the hindrance of thina middha, or sloth and torpor. It is the enemy of vitality, the thief of our precious time, and the quiet saboteur of our deepest intentions. To gain true control of our mind, we must learn not only how to calm its storms, but also how to burn through its fogs and find the strength to pull ourselves out of its mud. It is important to understand the two faces of this hindrance. The first part, sloth, thina, is primarily a mental state. It is a sluggishness of consciousness, a dullness, a heaviness. The mind feels unworkable, as if it is wrapped in thick layers of cotton wool. Thoughts are slow and murky. There is a profound lack of interest and a resistance to making any kind of effort. It is the voice that whispers, "This is too hard. It's not worth it. Just give up." The second part, torpor, middha, is its physical twin. It is a feeling of bodily heaviness, lethargy, and a powerful pull towards sleepiness. Even when you have had adequate rest, your posture slumps, your eyelids feel like lead weights, and the desire to simply lie down and check out becomes overwhelming. While it is a major obstacle in formal meditation, its effects permeate our entire life. It is the deep, sticky root of procrastination, the quiet apathy that prevents us from pursuing our goals, and the feeling of being chronically stuck in a life we do not love. It is a defensive strategy of the mind, a way of numbing ourselves and withdrawing when faced with tasks or feelings we find unpleasant or overwhelming. So, how do we work with this heavy, sticky energy? The first line of response is often physical. The mind and body form an inseparable system. And sometimes the quickest way to change a mental state is to change our physical state. When you notice the fog of sloth and torpor beginning to descend, you can apply a number of practical, physical antidotes. If you are sitting in meditation and feel yourself slumping and drifting off, the simple act of straightening your spine, pulling your shoulders back, and lifting your head can send a powerful signal of alertness back to the brain. If the dullness is intense, do not just sit there fighting a losing battle. Stand up. The change in posture itself can break the spell. You can practice a few minutes of mindful walking, bringing your full attention to the feeling of your feet on the floor. This grounds you in the body and introduces movement and energy. Another classic technique is to work with light. If your eyes are closed, open them. Let the light in. If possible, look at a bright object or look out the window at a patch of blue sky. Light has a direct physiological effect on the brain, counteracting the chemistry of drowsiness. Similarly, the use of water is a time-honored practice. Gently splashing your face with cool water can provide an immediate jolt of clarity, cutting through the mental fog like a brisk wind. Even your breath can be a tool. Instead of succumbing to the shallow, sleepy breaths that accompany torpor, you can intentionally take 2 or 3 deeper, fuller breaths, imagining you are filling your entire body with fresh, clean, energizing oxygen. These physical interventions are like using a strong fan to begin clearing the fog from a room. They are simple, immediate, and surprisingly effective first aid for the drowsy mind. While physical antidotes can provide immediate relief, the deeper, more lasting work is mental. We must learn to generate our own inner light and warmth. One of the most powerful mental antidotes is the conscious arousal of interest. Sloth and torpor thrive on boredom. The mind sinks because it has lost its interest, its zest, its sense of purpose. We can counteract this by deliberately reminding ourselves why we are engaged in this practice in the first place. Reconnect with your deepest motivation. Is it your desire for peace, your wish to be more present for your family, your aspiration to live a life of meaning and wisdom? Recalling your core intention can reignite the spark of effort. You can also generate interest by focusing on your meditation object with the curiosity of a scientist. Instead of being bored with the breath, can you become fascinated by its subtle qualities? Can you notice the tiny pause between the in-breath and the out-breath? This shift from passive boredom to active investigation can instantly brighten the mind. A second, and perhaps the most powerful, mental antidote is the contemplation on the preciousness of life, sometimes referred to as mindfulness of death or maranasati. This may sound morbid, but it is one of the most energizing and life-affirming reflections we can undertake. The practice involves soberly and realistically contemplating the fact that our time here is not guaranteed. Life is fragile, and death is certain, and the time of our death is unknown. This is not meant to create fear or depression. It is meant to shock us out of our complacency. It is a wake-up call. When we truly take in the reality that this day, this hour, this very breath could be our last, we are far less likely to waste it in a state of dull, sleepy procrastination. The reflection on death gives birth to a sense of urgency, a deep appreciation for the incredible gift of being alive right now. It makes us determined to use our precious time well. This leads directly to the third mental antidote, the active cultivation of joy and gratitude. A dark, damp room is a perfect environment for mold and mildew to grow. A bright, warm, and airy room is not. In the same way, the hindrance of sloth and torpor cannot thrive in a mind that is filled with joy and appreciation. When you feel the heaviness descending, you can consciously shift your attention. Bring to mind something you are genuinely grateful for. It could be a person, a pet, a simple pleasure, or the fact that you are safe and warm. You can also bring to mind a memory of a time you felt genuine joy and allow that feeling to permeate your body and mind. This is not about distracting yourself, but about actively changing the emotional weather inside you, making the inner climate inhospitable to the growth of dullness. In our daily lives, sloth and torpor often manifest as procrastination, especially when we are faced with a large or daunting task. The sheer size of the task is overwhelming, and the mind simply shuts down. Here, the parable of moving the boulder is our guide. If you are faced with a giant boulder blocking your path, to stand in front of it and try to push it with all your might. is a recipe for exhaustion and despair. The mind says, "It's impossible," and sloth sets in. The wise person doesn't try to push the whole boulder at once. They look for a small crack. They find a small, sharp wedge. This is your tiny, manageable first step, and a long, sturdy pole to use as a lever. This is your focused intention. They apply pressure, and the boulder moves, perhaps only by a millimeter. But it has moved. The spell of paralysis is broken. The lesson is clear. Do not focus on writing the entire report. That is the boulder. Focus on opening the document and writing a single sentence. That is the wedge. The secret to overcoming procrastination is to make the first step so ridiculously small that you cannot possibly say no to it. This builds momentum, and momentum is the enemy of inertia. Sloth and torpor, while seeming like a passive state, is an active hindrance that robs us of our vitality and our precious time. But we are not helpless against it. By using a combination of skillful physical and mental strategies, by changing our posture, arousing our interest, remembering the preciousness of life, and breaking down daunting tasks, we can learn to burn through the fog and step out of the quicksand. We learn to bring a bright, alert, and engaged energy to our life. We have now learned to work with the high energy of fire and flood and the low energy of fog and quicksand. We now turn our attention to a state of mind that is characterized not by low energy, but by a chaotic, scattered, and unproductive high energy, the state of restlessness and worry, the agitated and untamable mind of the monkey. We have explored the path of the wise gardener, learning to cultivate wholesome states and to skillfully handle the heavy, immobilizing fog of sloth and torpor. We have learned how to generate our own inner light when the mind grows dim. Now, we must turn our attention to the opposite extreme, an equally unproductive state that is characterized not by a lack of energy, but by an excess of it. This is not the calm, focused, and powerful energy of a laser beam, but the chaotic, scattered, and uncontrollable energy of a firework display going off inside our skull. This is the fifth hindrance, known as uddhacca kukuka, or restlessness and worry. It is the agitated monkey mind in its most frantic state, a relentless inner storm that whips up the waters of the mind, making clarity impossible. It is the engine of anxiety, and it robs us of our capacity for deep focus and our fundamental right to inner peace. To master the mind, we must learn to be the calm, quiet center of this storm, not by fighting the winds, but by finding an unshakable anchor that allows them to blow past us. This hindrance has two distinct, though closely related, faces. The first is restlessness, uddhacca. This is a raw, kinetic, and physical agitation. It's an inner fizzing, a profound inability to be still. When restlessness has taken hold, the mind cannot land on any object for more than a few seconds. It jumps from thought to sound to sensation and back again, never finding a place to rest. It is like trying to read a book while someone in the room is frantically flipping through television channels at high speed. This mental agitation often manifests physically as the urge to fidget, to check your phone, to get up and pace, to do anything other than be still in the present moment. It is the feeling of having ants in your pants, but the real source of the itch is in your mind. The second face of this hindrance, which provides the fuel for the restlessness, is worry and regret, kukuka. This is the narrative content of the storm. It is the mind's obsession with time traveling to places of pain. It relentlessly journeys to the past, creating endless, agonizing loops of regret and self-recrimination. I can't believe I said that. I shouldn't have done that. If only things had been different. Or it rockets into the future, creating countless catastrophic scenarios fueled by anxiety. What if I fail? What if they leave me? What if I get sick? The mind chews on these thoughts, spinning them over and over, trapped in a painful cycle of guilt for what has been and dread for what might be. The crucial insight here is that this entire, exhausting mental state is built upon a foundation of unreality. It is a storm about things that are not happening right now. The past is a memory, the future is a fantasy, but the stress, the adrenaline, and the suffering they cause in our bodies are profoundly real. The futility of fighting this state directly is perfectly captured in the parable of the muddy water. Imagine someone gives you a large glass jar filled with water, with a thick layer of fine silt and mud settled at the bottom. The water at the top is perfectly clear, and your task is to see your reflection in it. But just as you look, the jar is shaken, and the water becomes a murky, opaque brown soup. The anxious and untrained mind, desperate for instant clarity, would grab the jar and try to force the mud to settle. It might shake it more vigorously, thinking more effort is needed. It might yell at the jar, "Why aren't you clear yet?" It might try to stick its hand in and physically push the mud down. But all of these agitated efforts only stir up the mud more, making the water even murkier. The very struggle for clarity is what makes clarity impossible. The wise person, the one with a trained mind, understands the nature of water and mud. They know that you cannot force the mud to settle. They take the jar, place it on a steady, level surface, and then they practice the art of doing nothing. They sit patiently and allow the natural law of gravity to do its work. They watch as the largest particles of mud begin to drift down, followed by the smaller ones, and then the finest silt. Over time, without any struggle or interference, the mud settles completely at the bottom, and the water, of its own accord, returns to its natural state of perfect, crystalline clarity. The reflection becomes visible once more. This is the path to calming the restless mind. The mud is our collection of anxious thoughts and worries. Shaking the jar is our habit of fighting our thoughts, obsessing over our worries, and getting caught in the storm. The practice of calming the mind is the simple yet profound act of setting the jar down and letting it be. So, how do we set the jar down when the inner storm is raging? We must learn to bring the mind home to a place of stability. The first step is to come home to the body. The anxious mind is ungrounded, lost in a world of abstract thought and fearful fantasy. The immediate antidote is to connect with the tangible, solid reality of your physical self. Right now, feel your feet on the floor. Notice the points of contact, the pressure, the solidity of the earth beneath you. Feel the weight of your body in your chair. Feel the texture of your clothing against your skin. These are not concepts. They are direct, present moment sensations. This simple act of grounding your awareness in the physical body is like taking the jar of muddy water and placing it firmly on a steady, unmoving table. It stops the shaking. Once the jar is steady, we bring our attention to the unfailing anchor of the breath. When thoughts are racing like wild horses, the breath is the post we can tie them to. You do not need to stop your thoughts. That is an impossible task. Let them race in the background if they must, like traffic on a distant highway. Your job is to bring your primary attention, your focus, into your own front yard, to the simple, humble, physical sensation of the breath entering and leaving your body. Rest your awareness on the feeling of the air at your nostrils or the rising and falling of your abdomen. Each breath is a moment of stillness, a safe harbor in the midst of the storm. Each time your mind is swept away by a wave of worry, you gently and patiently guide it back to this anchor. This is how the mud begins to settle. As the mud settles, we can practice compassion for the storm. We are often at war with our own anxiety. We hate it, we fear it, we are ashamed of it. This aversion is a second arrow that makes the experience infinitely more painful. We become anxious about being anxious. The practice is to change this relationship. We can learn to see our anxiety not as an enemy, but as a misguided friend, a primitive part of our nervous system that is trying, in its clumsy way, to keep us safe. It is a faulty alarm bell that is ringing too loud and too often. We can mentally say to the feeling of anxiety, "I see you, I feel you. Thank you for trying to protect me. It's all right. I am safe in this moment." This act of befriending the feeling, of meeting the tension with softness, stops the cycle of panic. Finally, a very practical tool for a mind stuck in a loop of worry is to externalize the thoughts. Take out a piece of paper and a pen. For 10 minutes, write down every single worry that is circulating in your mind, without censorship. This act of writing brings the thoughts out of the dark, claustrophobic echo chamber of your skull and into the clear light of day. When you see your worries written down in black and white, they often lose their terrifying power. They can seem smaller, more manageable, or even slightly absurd. You can then go through the list and ask a practical question. Is there one skillful action I can take about any of these worries right now? If the answer is yes, you can make a simple plan. If the answer is no, you have given the worries a home on the page, and you can give yourself permission to let them rest there for a while, freeing up your mental space. We cannot command the winds of worry to stop blowing or the storm of restlessness to cease, but we are not helpless. We can learn to be the calm, unshakable eye of the storm. We can learn to set the jar down and trust in the natural process of settling by grounding ourselves in the body, anchoring to the breath, and treating our inner turmoil with compassion rather than aversion. We allow the muddy waters of the mind to become clear, revealing the profound clarity and deep peace that was always there, waiting patiently beneath the surface. Having learned to work with the high, chaotic energy of anxiety, we now turn our attention to one of the most persistent and damaging voices in the untrained mind, the relentless, demoralizing, and often cruel voice of the inner critic. We have navigated the turbulent weather of the mind. We have learned to work with the high-energy storms of anger, desire, and anxiety, and the low-energy fogs of sloth and torpor. We are learning to become the calm, steady center of our own experience. Yet, even when the major storms have passed, there is often a persistent, nagging voice that remains, a cruel narrator who insists on replaying our failures and forecasting our doom. It is not a dramatic gale force wind, but a cold, cutting drizzle of self-judgment that can leave us feeling soaked, chilled, and demoralized. This is the voice of the inner critic. It is the internal judge, jury, and executioner that lives inside our heads, tirelessly prosecuting the case against our own worthiness. It is one of the most insidious and painful sources of our suffering, and it often provides the toxic fuel for all the other hindrances. To truly control our mind, we must learn to see this critic for what it is, to dismantle its authority, and to compassionately, yet firmly, fire it from its long-held position as the manager of our self-esteem. To begin this process, we must first understand the origin of this harsh, inner voice. The inner critic is not an essential part of who you are. You were not born with it. It is a psychological ghost, a construct, a collage of critical voices that you have internalized from your past. It is the echo of a disappointed parent's sigh, the sharp tone of a demanding teacher, the cruel taunt of a schoolyard bully, or the impossibly perfect standards presented by society and the media. As young, impressionable children, our survival depended on the approval of the adults and peers around us. We absorbed their judgments, their standards, and their tones of voice like a sponge. We learned that to be accepted and safe, we needed to monitor ourselves for flaws and correct them before anyone else did. In this sense, the inner critic began as a primitive and misguided protective strategy. Its original intention was to keep us safe from external shame and rejection by shaming and rejecting ourselves first. But this internal security system, designed for a different time and place, has become overactive and malignant. It is now a source of constant internal suffering, a relentless bully from whom there is no physical escape. Understanding that the critic is a learned, habitual, and ultimately misguided protective mechanism allows us to approach it not with more self-hatred, but with a degree of wisdom and compassion, even as we move to disarm it. A helpful way to visualize your relationship with the inner critic is to imagine a parrot that sits on your shoulder. From the moment you were very young, this parrot has been with you, and its only talent is to perfectly mimic and record sounds. Throughout your life, it has heard every critical word directed at you. It recorded the time a parent said, "Why can't you be more like your sibling?" It recorded the teacher who wrote "careless work" in red ink on your assignment. It recorded the sting of social rejection, the pain of failure, the messages from advertising telling you that you are not thin enough, rich enough, or successful enough. Now, as an adult, the parrot's programming is complete. Whenever you make a small mistake, it leans in and squawks in your ear, perfectly replaying one of those old painful recordings. You always mess things up. You're not smart enough for this. No one will ever love you if you act like that. The core problem is that you have lived with this parrot for so long, you have forgotten that it is a parrot. You believe its voice is your own authentic voice. You believe its harsh squawking is the voice of objective truth. The first and most profound step to freedom is the moment of realization when you can finally turn and see the parrot for what it is. It is the moment you can say, with liberating clarity, "That's not me, that's not the truth, that's just the parrot talking." This act of disidentification is the beginning of firing your inner critic. Once we see the critic as an externalized parrot, we can begin to implement a three-step strategy to systematically dismantle its power. The first step is to recognize and name it. This is the application of pure mindfulness. The moment you notice that familiar stream of self-judgment beginning in your mind, the "I'm not good enough" story, the harsh analysis of a recent social interaction your practice is to simply stop and label it. You can say to yourself, silently and gently, "The critic is here," or "the judge is in session," or you can simply use the metaphor, parrot. This simple act of naming is revolutionary. It immediately creates a space between your conscious awareness and the toxic thought stream. It shifts you from being the person being judged to being the person observing the process of judging. You are no longer fused with the voice. You are watching it. This robs it of its immediate hypnotic power. The second step, now that you have created some space, is to question its authority. A parrot has no real authority. It only has the power of mimicry. We can bring a gentle, rational curiosity to the critic's pronouncements. We can ask ourselves, is this thought actually 100% true? Is it an undeniable fact that I am a complete failure because I made one mistake at work? The answer is almost always no. The critic deals in harsh, black and white generalizations, not in nuanced reality. We can also investigate its tone. Does this voice sound like calm, compassionate wisdom, or does it sound cruel, impatient, and contemptuous? Wisdom speaks with kindness and seeks to help. The critic speaks with cruelty and seeks only to condemn. By investigating the truthfulness and the tone of the critic's message, we expose it as an unreliable and unhelpful narrator. We see that we have been taking advice from a source that is fundamentally not on our side. The third and most crucial step is to actively replace the voice. It is not enough to simply create a vacuum where the critic used to be. We must consciously and intentionally cultivate a new inner voice. This is the act of feeding the other wolf. This new voice is the voice of self-compassion, the voice of a wise and unconditionally loving friend. When the inner critic squawks, "You're so stupid for making that mistake," we first recognize it, we question it, and then we actively introduce the voice of compassion. The compassionate voice might say, "That was a difficult situation, and you did the best you could with the tools you had at the time. It's okay to make mistakes. That is how we learn. This is a moment of suffering. Let me be kind to myself." This new voice embodies the three components of self-compassion: kindness toward ourselves in the face of failure, a recognition of our common humanity, the fact that everyone makes mistakes, and the mindful awareness to see our pain without being consumed by it. At first, this new voice may feel artificial and weak, while the critic's voice feels loud and familiar. But with consistent practice, with every repetition, we are carving new neural pathways in the brain. We are building a new habit. To fire the inner critic is not a single, dramatic event. It is a patient and persistent practice of withdrawing our belief and our attention from its toxic narrative and reinvesting that belief and attention in a new inner dialogue of kindness, encouragement, and unconditional self-worth. Over time, like a plant that is no longer watered, the critic's voice begins to wither. It may still squawk from time to time, but its pronouncements become faint and unconvincing. And the voice of the compassionate inner friend, nurtured by our consistent practice, becomes our new default, our new inner guide. This is how we transform our inner world from a harsh and unforgiving courtroom into a safe, supportive, and loving home. As the loud, distracting, and demoralizing voices of the inner critic and the other hindrances begin to quiet down, we gain a new and profound capacity. We are no longer simply reacting to the chaos of our inner state. We can now begin to proactively and skillfully direct our most precious mental resource. This brings us to the liberating art of purposefully guiding our own attention. We have journeyed inward to face the great saboteurs of our peace. We have learned to work with the high-energy storms of anger and desire, the low-energy fogs of sloth, the chaotic winds of anxiety, and the persistent, cruel whisper of the inner critic. As these inner voices begin to quiet down, as the storms begin to subside, a new kind of space opens up within us. A clearing appears in the dense jungle of the mind. The crucial question then becomes, what will we do with this newfound clarity? The untamed mind is a passive recipient of experience. Its attention is constantly hijacked and dragged away by whatever is loudest, brightest, most threatening, or most seductive in its environment. The trained mind, however, develops a new and powerful capacity, the ability to choose where it places its focus. It learns to consciously direct its most precious and non-renewable resource, the very currency of life itself, its attention. This section is about learning to become the master of this resource. It is about moving from being a distracted consumer of experience to being a wise and powerful director of your own awareness. To fully appreciate the importance of this training, we must first recognize the environment in which we live. We are living in the middle of a war, a silent and relentless war for our attention. The modern world has given rise to something called the attention economy, and its business model is simple: to capture as much of your conscious awareness as possible and then sell it to advertisers. The apps on your phone, the social media feeds you scroll, the news alerts that pop up, the video streaming services that automatically play the next episode, these are not neutral tools. They are the products of brilliant minds, backed by billions of dollars in research, all geared toward one single purpose: to figure out how to bypass your rational mind and hook the primitive, impulsive parts of your brain. They use sophisticated psychological principles, intermittent variable rewards, just like a slot machine. social validation triggers like likes and comments, and the powerful lure of outrage and novelty to keep you scrolling, clicking, and watching, often against your own better judgment. The result of living in this environment without conscious training is a mind that is perpetually fragmented, scattered, and distracted. We lose the ability for deep, sustained thought. We lose the capacity to be fully present in our own offline lives, with our own families and friends. We lose our very sense of agency, the feeling that we are the ones choosing how to spend the precious moments of our day. In this context, to not actively practice controlling your attention is to passively cede control of your mind, and therefore your life, to the algorithms and corporations that are bidding for it. The simple act of choosing where to place your focus becomes a radical act of freedom. A powerful and ancient metaphor for this inner work is the parable of the charioteer. Imagine that your being is a chariot. The chariot itself is your physical body. The horses that pull the chariot are your five senses, along with the powerful impulses of your mind. There is a horse of sight, a horse of sound, a horse of taste, and so on. Each horse is powerful and full of energy, but each has its own will. The horse of sight wants to veer off the path to look at a beautiful flower. The horse of hearing wants to stop to listen to a distant piece of music. The horse of desire wants to chase after a fleeting pleasure. The reins are the faculty of the disciplined mind, the tools of mindfulness and concentration, and you, your deepest wisdom and highest intention, are the charioteer. In an untrained person, the charioteer is either asleep or looking the other way. They hold the reins so loosely that they may as well not be holding them at all. The horses are in complete control. They pull the chariot erratically in every direction, fighting against each other. The ride is chaotic, jarring, and dangerous. The chariot frequently veers off the path, getting stuck in the ditches of distraction and the thorny brambles of conflict. This is the life of the untamed mind, a life lived at the mercy of every passing impulse. The master charioteer, however, is fully awake and present. They hold the reins with a grip that is both firm and sensitive. They are not cruelly whipping the horses into submission. That would only make them rebellious and fearful. Instead, the master charioteer has taken the time to understand the nature of each horse. They know their strengths and their tendencies. With a clear intention for their destination and a skillful use of the reins, they guide all the powerful horses to work together to pull in a single, unified direction. The ride is now smooth, swift, and purposeful. The chariot stays firmly on the path, moving gracefully toward its noble destination. This is the image of a controlled and mastered mind. To become this charioteer is the goal of our practice. It means learning to hold the reins of our attention and to guide the powerful energies of our senses and mind toward what is wholesome and beneficial. So how do we practically train to become this master charioteer? The first and most fundamental practice is to harness the power of intention. Before you begin any activity, whether it is a major work project or the simple act of having a conversation, pause for a moment, close your eyes, take one conscious breath, and set a clear, simple intention. For the next hour, my sole intention is to bring my full attention to this report. Or, in this conversation, my sole intention is to listen with an open heart. This simple act is like the charioteer telling the horses which direction they are going before the journey begins. It primes the brain, focuses its resources, and creates a clear pathway for your energy to flow. Next, we must embrace single-tasking as a radical act. Our culture glorifies multitasking, but neuroscience has shown us that multitasking is a myth. The brain cannot actually focus on two complex tasks at once. What it does instead is switch its attention back and forth very rapidly. This constant switching is incredibly inefficient. It drains our mental energy, increases the likelihood of errors, and elevates our stress levels. The practice of doing one thing at a time, of bringing our full, undivided attention to a single task, from its beginning to its end, is a powerful form of mind training. It is an act of rebellion against the culture of distraction. A wonderfully effective technique for training this single-pointed focus is the method known as time boxing, or the Pomodoro technique. The method is simple. First, you choose a single, specific task you want to work on. Second, you set a timer for a short, manageable period. 25 minutes is traditional, but you can start with just 10 or 15. Third, and this is the most important part, you make a vow to yourself that you will work only on that single task, without any interruptions, until the timer rings. No checking email, no looking at your phone, no getting up for a snack. Your universe becomes that one task. When the timer rings, you must stop and take a short, mandatory break of about 5 minutes. Stretch, look out the window, get a glass of water. Then, you can set the timer for another session. This technique is brilliant because it trains the focus muscle in manageable intervals, just like lifting weights at a gym. It makes large, intimidating tasks feel approachable, and over time, it builds your capacity for long periods of deep, sustained concentration. It is the practical method by which the charioteer trains the horses to gallop at a steady, powerful pace. To control your mind, you must first learn to control your attention. It is the foundational skill, the master key that unlocks all other forms of inner mastery. The quality of your life is nothing more and nothing less than the quality of what you pay attention to. In a world that is systematically designed to scatter your focus and hijack your awareness, the simple, conscious act of choosing where to place your mind is the ultimate declaration of your freedom and your power. It is the profound difference between being a helpless passenger in a chaotic chariot and being the calm, clear-eyed master of the journey. When we develop this masterful control over our attention, we gain a remarkable new ability. We can not only choose what we look at, but we can also choose how we look at it. We gain the power to consciously change the lens through which we view the world, which in turn transforms our entire emotional and psychological experience of it. This brings us to the skillful art of reframing our perceptions. We have now learned to become the master of our own attention, the skilled charioteer who can guide the powerful horses of the senses and mind in a chosen direction. This is a monumental step in gaining control of our inner world. It gives us the ability to focus, to work effectively, and to be present in our own lives. But the next stage of mastery involves a skill that is even more subtle and profound. It is not just about choosing what we look at, but about consciously choosing how we see it. It is the ability to use our controlled attention to change the very lens through which we view the events of our life, and in doing so, to transform our entire emotional and psychological reality. This is the mental alchemy of cognitive reframing, the art of taking the raw, neutral data of life and deliberately choosing the meaning we assign to it, thereby liberating ourselves from the prison of automatic, negative interpretations. The foundational principle of this practice, a truth echoed in ancient Stoic philosophy and modern cognitive behavioral therapy, is that our suffering never arises from events themselves, but only from the stories we tell ourselves about those events. An event in the world is just a neutral fact. It rains. You receive a criticism at work. You get stuck in a traffic jam. These things, in themselves, have no inherent emotional charge. They simply are. The suffering begins the moment the untrained mind leaps into action, weaving a powerful and usually negative story around the neutral fact. This rain has completely ruined my day. A story of aversion, and disappointment. This criticism proves I'm a failure, and my boss hates me. A story of fear and shame. This traffic jam is a disaster, and my whole evening is destroyed. A story of frustration and catastrophizing. We do not suffer from the rain, the criticism, or the traffic. We suffer from the stories. The untrained mind tells these stories automatically, instantly, and unconsciously. It is a deeply conditioned reflex, usually with a strong negativity biasa holdover from our evolutionary past, when it was safer to assume the worst. The great work of controlling the mind is to learn to see the space between the event and the story. It is to use our mindfulness to catch the mind in the very act of interpretation. When we can see that space, we realize we have a choice. We do not have to believe the first story the mind offers. We can, with conscious effort, choose to tell a different, more skillful, and more empowering story. This is the ultimate locus of our inner freedom and control. This wisdom is perfectly encapsulated in the ancient Taoist parable of the farmer and his horse. This story is a masterclass in the art of withholding premature judgment and reframing perception. There was an old farmer whose only horse, his most valuable possession for working the land, ran away. His neighbors, hearing the news, rushed to his home to offer their condolences. "Oh, this is such terrible luck," they said. "How will you manage?" The farmer, in his calm way, simply replied, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" The neighbors went away, puzzled by his strange response. A few days later, the farmer's horse returned, and following it was a magnificent herd of wild horses it had befriended in the mountains. The neighbors were astounded. They ran back to the farmer, this time to celebrate his good fortune. "You are a rich man. This is the most amazing luck," they shouted. Again, the farmer just looked at them and said, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" The following week, the farmer's only son was attempting to train one of the wild horses when he was thrown off, and his leg was badly broken. The neighbors gathered once more, shaking their heads in sorrow. "Your only son, your only help, now crippled. This is truly a disaster. This is the worst luck imaginable." The farmer, looking at his son resting with his leg in a splint, replied with the same quiet refrain, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" A month later, the emperor's army marched into the village, forcibly conscripting every able-bodied young man to fight in a brutal war on a distant frontier, a war from which no one expected them to return. Because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was the only young man in the village to be spared. The neighbors in this story represent our ordinary, untrained mind. It rushes to apply a rigid, black and white label of good or bad to every event, based on a completely limited and short-sighted perspective. The farmer represents the wise, trained mind. His constant refrain, "Who knows?" is not an expression of ignorance. It is an expression of profound wisdom. He understands that he cannot possibly perceive the full tapestry of cause and effect from his limited vantage point. He skillfully resists his mind's compulsive urge to create a definitive, simplistic story. This not knowing, this spacious uncertainty, is the heart of equanimity. It keeps his mind open, peaceful, and resilient, allowing him to respond to reality as it actually unfolds, rather than being trapped and tormented by his own initial interpretation. So, how do we become more like the farmer? How do we practice this cognitive alchemy in our own lives? It begins with the simple but powerful act of changing our language. When faced with a difficulty, notice the word your mind uses. Does it call it a problem? That word itself feels heavy, static, and negative. The practice is to consciously relabel it. Instead of a problem, perhaps it is a challenge. The word challenge has an entirely different energy. It is active, and it implies that we have the capacity to rise up and meet it, or perhaps it is simply a situation. This neutral term strips away the negative emotional charge and allows us to see it more clearly. This is not self-deception. It is a skillful use of language to manage our own inner state. Beyond just relabeling, we can train ourselves to ask a different set of questions when faced with adversity. The untrained mind asks, "Why is this happening to me? Whose fault is this?" These questions lead only to feelings of victimhood and resentment. The trained mind asks, "What can I learn from this?" Or, "How might this situation be an opportunity for me to grow?" Or, "Is there any hidden blessing or silver lining here that I am currently not seeing?" A painful breakup can be reframed as a powerful opportunity to learn about oneself and to cultivate independence. A frightening health diagnosis can be reframed as a potent reminder to live each day with gratitude and meaning. A failure in business can be reframed as an invaluable education in resilience and strategy. It is crucial to understand that this is not naive optimism or a form of toxic positivity. Reframing is not about pretending a painful situation is not painful. The first arrow still hurts. The farmer was no doubt sad when his son broke his leg. Reframing is not about denying the pain. It is about accepting the reality of the situation and then consciously choosing to direct our attention toward the elements of it that are empowering, instructive, and conducive to our long-term growth, rather than dwelling on the narratives that lead to despair and paralysis. It is a skillful and compassionate use of our trained attention. To master the art of reframing is to become an alchemist of the mind. It is the deep realization that while we cannot always control the events that happen to us, we have absolute power over the meaning we assign to them. We can learn to take the raw, heavy lead of difficult circumstances and consciously transmute it into the shining gold of wisdom, resilience, and compassion. This is the true power of a controlled mind, not the power to manipulate the world to our liking, but the far greater power to change our experience of the world, which, in the end, is the only thing that truly matters. This profound ability to reframe our perception, to find opportunity in adversity, and to withhold our immediate judgment requires a deep inner stability. It requires us to be able to pause in the space between the event and our habitual story. This ability to pause, to endure discomfort without an immediate, compulsive reaction, is a genuine superpower in our fast-paced, reactive modern world. It is the essential and noble quality of patience. We have now explored the power of the controlled mind to reframe our perception, to become the alchemist that can transform the lead of a difficult situation into the gold of wisdom. We have seen that the space between an event and our story about it is where our freedom lies. But to inhabit that space, to resist the mind's powerful, conditioned reflex, to react instantly with a story of anger or despair, requires a specific kind of inner strength. It is a strength that is quiet, not loud. It is a strength that holds its ground, that endures, that allows processes to unfold in their own time. In a world that worships speed and demands instant gratification, this quality is perhaps the most countercultural and the most essential of all. This is the great virtue of Khanti, a word from the Pali language that translates as patience, forbearance, and a courageous endurance. Patience is not the passive weakness of resignation. It is the calm, unwavering, and formidable strength of a mind that has learned to be at peace with the rhythm of reality. We must begin by dismantling our modern misunderstanding of patience. We often equate patience with being a doormat, with passively accepting mistreatment, or with a lazy kind of waiting around for things to get better on their own. This is not Khanti. True patience is an active and dynamic quality of the heart and mind. It is the strength to bear with difficult and unpleasant situations without losing your center. It is the capacity to be with an annoying person without reacting with anger. It is the ability to stay with the discomfort of a strong craving without immediately acting on it. It is the willingness to allow a painful emotion to run its course without trying to suppress it or distract yourself from it. Patience is the constant and faithful companion of equanimity. Its opposite is impatience, which is a form of dosa, or aversion. Impatience is a violent rejection of the present moment. It is the mind screaming, "I hate this. This situation should not be happening. I want the next moment, and I want it now." This inner state is one of constant friction and stress. When we are impatient, our bodies are tense, our breathing is shallow, and our minds are filled with agitation. We are at war with time itself. Patience, therefore, is a profound and radical act of peacemaking. It is the choice to lay down our arms in the war against what is. It is a deep, internal declaration that says, "I have the strength to be with this moment, exactly as it is. I can endure this discomfort without reacting. I can allow this process to unfold in its own time." This is not weakness. This is the quiet, unshakable power of a mountain that can withstand any storm. To understand why patience is so difficult for us to cultivate, we must recognize that our entire modern world has been engineered to destroy it. We live in a culture of immediacy, a civilization built on the promise of instant gratification. If you want to talk to someone, you send an instant message and often expect an instant reply. If you want to watch a movie, you can stream it instantly. If you want to eat, fast food is available in minutes. If you want to buy something, you can do so with a single click and have it delivered to your door the next day. This environment relentlessly trains our brains. It carves deep neurological pathways that expect and demand a minimal gap between desire and fulfillment. This conditioning has made our minds deeply intolerant of any process that requires time and waiting. When we are then confronted with a situation where waiting is unavoidable, being stuck in a traffic jam, waiting for a painful injury to heal, learning a complex new skill, or, most relevantly, the slow, organic, and non-linear process of spiritual growth or mind rebels, we feel an intense agitation, a frustration that seems unbearable. We have weakened our patience muscle through lack of use, and now, when we truly need its strength, we find it has atrophied. The practice of mastering the mind requires us to consciously and deliberately rebuild this essential muscle. The nature of patient, long-term cultivation is beautifully illustrated in the parable of the bamboo farmer. There is a species of giant bamboo that, when planted, displays a unique growth pattern. A farmer prepares the soil with great care, plants the seed, and then begins the patient work of watering and tending to the plot of earth. After the first full year has passed, nothing has appeared above the ground. A neighbor, seeing him watering an empty field, might think he is a fool. The second year passes, and still nothing. The third year, the fourth year, the surface of the soil remains barren. An impatient person would have abandoned the project long ago, convinced the seeds were dead or the soil was infertile. But this farmer is wise. He has faith in the unseen process. He continues to water, to weed, and to wait, with steady, unwavering patience. Then, sometime in the fifth year, a remarkable event occurs. A tiny green shoot pokes up through the soil, and then the bamboo begins to grow with an almost supernatural speed. It can shoot up dozens of feet into the sky in just a matter of weeks, quickly becoming a towering, magnificent grove. The spectacular growth was not a sudden miracle. It was the result of 5 years of patient, invisible work. All that time, beneath the surface, The bamboo was slowly and deliberately building a massive and complex network of roots. It was this deep, strong, and extensive foundation that made the rapid, upward growth possible. Without the 5 years of patient tending, there would be no grove. Our practice of transforming the mind is exactly like growing this bamboo. For a long time, we may feel like we are just watering empty ground. We sit in meditation, and our mind still wanders. We try to be kind, and we still feel anger. We try to be focused, and we still get distracted. It can be easy to become discouraged, to believe that nothing is happening. Patience is the quality that allows us to keep watering the soil, to keep showing up for our practice, even when we see no dramatic results on the surface. Patience is the deep trust that beneath the surface of our conscious awareness, a new root system of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom is slowly and steadily growing. Without this patient endurance, we will abandon the project long before the bamboo has a chance to sprout. We can train this patience muscle in the gymnasium of our daily lives. Life constantly provides us with opportunities. The long line at the post office is not an obstacle. It is a patience dojo. Instead of fuming with irritation, can you use that time to feel your feet on the floor, to notice your breath, to relax the tension in your shoulders? The slow driver in the lane ahead of you is not your enemy. They are your teacher of forbearance. Can you send them a silent wish of loving kindness instead of anger? The computer that is running slowly is a chance to practice being with the unpleasant feeling of impatience without reacting. And most importantly, we must learn to be patient with ourselves. This is perhaps the most profound application of Kanti. There will be days when we feel clear, calm, and wise. And there will be days when we feel like the wild elephant is once again in complete control, dragging us through the mud. The impatient mind will judge this as failure and will want to give up. The patient mind meets this experience with kindness and understanding. It recognizes that this path is not a straight, linear ascent, but a spiral, where we may circle back to old challenges with a new level of wisdom. Patience with ourselves is the compassionate act of acknowledging where we are today, without judgment, and simply beginning again with a gentle and forgiving heart. Patience is not a passive waiting for things to get better. It is the active, resilient, and courageous strength to be with things as they are. It is the quiet power that creates the space necessary for wisdom to ripen and for transformation to occur. In our world that screams for speed, for hacks, for instant results, the conscious cultivation of patience is a radical act of sanity and profound self-care. It is the ability to align ourselves with the deep, organic rhythm of life, rather than demanding that life conform to our own frantic and impatient timeline. It is the solid, unshakable ground upon which true and lasting mastery of the mind is built. With our mind now steadied by patience and sharpened by concentration, we can begin to use it as a truly creative force. We can move from simply managing the chaos of our inner world to actively shaping it for the better. This brings us to the profound and often overlooked power of setting a clear and wholesome intention. We have journeyed deep into the inner landscape, learning to cultivate the steady ground of patience. We have seen that this quiet virtue is not a passive waiting, but a dynamic strength, the inner fortitude that allows us to bear with difficulty and to trust in processes that unfold in their own time. With our mind sharpened by concentration and now stabilized by patience, we are ready to engage in a truly creative act. We can now move beyond simply managing the mind's chaos and begin to actively shape its direction. A sharp axe, as we have seen, is a powerful tool. A steady hand is essential for wielding it. But the most fundamental question remains: in which direction will we swing the axe? Will we use it to build a shelter or to cause destruction? The factor that determines the outcome, the force that gives moral color to all our actions, is our intention. In the Buddhist path, learning to control the mind culminates in learning to consciously wield the profound power of intention. It is the art of becoming the master architect of our own inner world, knowing that the blueprint we create in our mind will inevitably become the structure of our life. The Buddha's teaching on this subject is radical and empowering. He demystified the often misunderstood concept of karma, moving it from a system of cosmic reward and punishment to a direct principle of psychological cause and effect. He said, "It is intention, monks, that I call karma. Having intended, one then acts through body, speech, and mind." This is a revolutionary statement. It means that the ethical quality of any action is not determined by the outcome, which is often beyond our control, but by the intention, the volition, the mental impulse that gives birth to the action. Think of a surgeon. She takes a sharp scalpel and cuts into another person's body, a physically violent act, but her intention is pure. It is the intention to heal, to remove disease, and to relieve suffering. Because her intention is wholesome, the act is wholesome. Now think of an attacker on the street who uses a knife to harm someone. The physical action cutting with a sharp blade is similar, but the intention is one of malice, greed, or hatred. The intention is unwholesome, and therefore the act and its consequences are unwholesome. This principle applies to every moment of our lives. Every thought we think, every word we speak, every action we take is preceded by a subtle intention, a mental seed. If we harbor an intention of resentment, we are planting a seed of resentment in the garden of our mind, one that will bear the bitter fruit of conflict and inner turmoil. If we cultivate an intention of generosity, we are planting a seed of generosity, which will bear the sweet fruit of connection and joy. We are, in every moment, creating our future selves through the quality of the intentions we hold right now. To truly control your mind, then, is to become the master of this seed planting process. It is to learn to consciously choose and cultivate the wholesome intentions that will lead to peace and freedom for ourselves and for others. A powerful metaphor for the role of intention is that of a ship's captain setting out on a long voyage across a vast ocean. Before the great ship even leaves the safety of the harbor, the skilled captain performs their most important task. They consult their charts, they understand their destination, and they set their compass. They establish a clear bearing, for example, true north. This setting of the compass is the setting of their intention. It is the guiding principle for the entire journey. Once at sea, the ship will encounter all kinds of weather. There will be days of calm seas and favorable winds, where the journey is smooth and easy. There will also be violent storms that rage for days, with colossal waves and howling winds that blow the ship far off its course. There will be thick fogs where the captain can see nothing and feels completely lost. An unskilled captain, one with no compass or a faulty one, would be at the mercy of these conditions. In the storm, they would panic, lose their way, and risk being dashed upon the rocks. In the fog, they would drift aimlessly. But the master captain, even in the heart of the most terrifying storm, has an inner resource. After the ship has been tossed and turned, once the winds have died down, the captain does not despair. They know exactly what to do. They return to their most trusted instrument, the compass. They look at the needle, and despite the chaos of the storm, despite how far off course they have been blown, the needle is pointing steadfastly, quietly, and unerringly toward true north. Their core intention remains unchanged by the external conditions. Using this reliable, internal guide, the captain can now reassess their position, adjust the ship's rudder, and skillfully steer the vessel back onto its proper course. Our life is this great voyage. Our highest aspiration for a life of wisdom and peace is our destination. Our intention is our compass. The storms and fogs are the inevitable challenges of life, sickness, loss, conflict, and confusion. The untamed mind is the unskilled captain who panics and gets hopelessly lost in the storm. The trained mind, guided by a clear and unwavering intention, may be battered and blown off course, but it never truly loses its way. It always has an internal guide to point the way home. So, how do we practice this in our lives? It begins with making a clear distinction between goals and intentions. Our culture is obsessed with goals. A goal is an external outcome we wish to achieve in the future. To get the promotion, to buy the house, to lose 10 pounds. The problem with goals is that they are in the future, and their achievement is often dependent on many external factors that are outside our control. This can lead to anxiety and disappointment. An intention, on the other hand, is an internal quality of being that we choose to embody in the present moment. It is always within our control. For example, the goal might be, I want my presentation to be a huge success. This is not fully in our control. The corresponding intention might be, I intend to bring my full presence, diligence, and a spirit of generosity to this presentation. That is 100% within our control, right now. The paradox is that by focusing on embodying a wholesome intention, we are far more likely to achieve our goals as a natural byproduct. A simple but life-changing practice is to begin each day by setting an intention. Before you pick up your phone, before your mind gets consumed by the day's to-do list, take just 2 or 3 minutes to sit in silence. You can ask yourself, what quality do I wish to cultivate and embody today? Your intention could be very simple. Today, my intention is to practice patience with my children. Today, I intend to listen deeply without interrupting. Today, I will meet my moments of stress with a conscious, calming breath. This simple act sets the compass for the day. It provides a quiet, guiding principle that you can return to when the inevitable storms of daily life arise. We can also practice setting micro-intentions throughout the day. These are small, conscious resets that take only a few seconds. Before you enter a difficult meeting, you can pause at the door and set the intention, may I remain calm and speak with kindness. Before you open your laptop to work, you can set the intention, may I bring my full focus to this task for the next hour. Before you greet your partner at the end of the day, you can set the intention, may I be truly present and open-hearted in this interaction. Each of these small acts of conscious direction is like the captain making a minor but crucial adjustment to the rudder, ensuring the great ship of your life stays on its chosen course. To learn to control the mind is to become the architect of your own character and the captain of your own voyage. The intentions we hold are the blueprints for the person we are becoming. While we cannot always control the weather of our lives, we have complete and utter control over the compass setting in our own heart. By consistently, patiently, and consciously setting our compass toward the true north of wisdom, compassion, and peace, we steer our lives away from the treacherous, rocky shores of reactivity and suffering, and toward the safe and welcoming harbor of our own highest potential. We are no longer merely passengers, tossed about by the waves. We are the calm and confident masters of the journey. When we learn to master our own mind in this way, through mindfulness, concentration, patience, and clear intention, it inevitably changes not only our inner world, but also the way we show up in the outer world. It transforms our relationship with every person we meet. We can now explore how to use our tamed mind not as a fortress for self-protection, but as a bridge for deep and meaningful connection with others. We have been on a profound inward journey, learning to captain the great ship of our own mind. We have sharpened our concentration, cultivated patience, and learned to set the compass of our intention toward the true north of wisdom and peace. This inner work is the foundation of a free life. But we are not solitary sailors on an empty ocean. We live in a world filled with other ships, each navigating its own storms, each guided by its own compass. A crucial measure of our own mastery, therefore, is not just how we handle our own vessel in isolation, but how we navigate the complex and often crowded waters of our relationships with others. The untrained mind, governed by the ego's primal fear, primarily uses its intelligence to build a fortress. Its goal is self-protection, and it achieves this by constructing thick walls of judgment, comparison, and suspicion. It keeps others out, believing that isolation is safety. The trained mind, however, the mind that has been tamed and controlled through compassionate practice, discovers a new and far more rewarding purpose for its power. It realizes that true safety and profound happiness are not found in fortification, but in connection. This is the great turning point in our practice, when we learn to stop using our mind to build a fortress and begin using it to build a bridge. Let us first examine the architecture of the ego's fortress. The untamed mind is a master builder of walls, and its primary materials are judgment and comparison. From the moment it encounters another person, it begins its work. It immediately categorizes them, good or bad, smart or stupid, attractive or unattractive, useful or useless, like me or not like me. This constant stream of judgment creates a sense of separation, a clear demarcation between us on the inside of the fortress and them on the outside. This is followed by the insidious work of comparison. The ego constantly measures itself against others. Is their career more successful? Are their children better behaved? Is their house bigger? Is their body more fit? This ceaseless measuring inevitably leads to one of two painful states: envy and jealousy if we perceive ourselves as lacking, or arrogance and pride if we perceive ourselves as superior. Both states, envy and arrogance, are simply different kinds of walls that deepen our sense of separation. At its core, the fortress is built on a foundation of fear. The ego views other people as potential threats to its resources, its status, its beliefs, and its very sense of self. This defensive posture means we are never truly at ease with others. We are always on guard. The great tragedy of this fortress is that while it may seem to offer protection, it is, in reality, a cold, dark, and lonely prison. The safety it provides is the impoverished safety of solitary confinement, cutting us off from the warmth, the nourishment, and the joy of genuine human connection. Now, imagine a different possibility, illustrated by the parable of the two builders. Two people find themselves stranded on the opposite cliffs of a deep and wide chasm. The chasm represents the natural distance, misunderstanding, and differences that exist between any two individuals. Both builders have access to the same set of resources, an abundance of wood, stone, and tools, which represent our own mental and emotional energy. The first builder, operating from the untamed mind, looks across the chasm and sees the other person as a potential rival or threat. Driven by fear and suspicion, he uses all his resources to construct a high, thick stone wall along the very edge of his cliff. He builds a mighty fortress. He expends enormous energy on this project, and when he is finished, he feels secure and protected behind his impenetrable wall. But he is also completely alone, his only view being the cold, hard stone of his own creation. The second builder, operating from a trained and compassionate mind, looks across the chasm and sees not a threat, but another being, just like himself. He feels a sense of connection, a wish to bridge the distance. So he uses his wood, stone, and tools for a different purpose. He begins the difficult, patient, and sometimes vulnerable work of construction, not building upwards to create a wall, but building outwards over the empty space. He carefully lays a foundation, arches a support, and plank by plank begins to construct a bridge. It is a challenging and collaborative process that requires trust and skill. After much effort, the bridge is complete. Now, a pathway exists where once there was only an empty chasm. The two builders can cross over, meet one another, share their resources, offer help in times of need, and enjoy the richness of companionship. They have used their energy to transform a space of separation into a place of profound connection. Our mind is this collection of resources. We can spend our entire lives using its power to build walls of judgment, or we can learn to use it to build bridges of understanding. The choice is ours. In every interaction, how do we build such a bridge? It is not a vague or sentimental process. It is a work of skillful engineering, requiring three main components, three strong planks, each one corresponding to a quality of the controlled mind that we have been cultivating. The first plank, the very foundation of the bridge on the other side of the chasm, is deep listening, which is powered by our cultivated concentration. Before we can connect with someone, we must first understand their reality. This requires us to silence our own inner chatter and offer them the rare gift of our full, undivided attention. We use the power of our trained focus, our samadhi, to listen not just to their words, but to the feelings and needs beneath the words. We listen not to find flaws in their argument or to formulate our rebuttal, but with the sole, sincere intention of understanding their experience. This act of focused, non-judgmental listening is what allows us to securely anchor the bridge on their side of the chasm. The second plank, the main walkway of the bridge itself, is compassionate understanding, which is powered by our cultivated heart of karuna. As we listen deeply, we will inevitably hear things we disagree with, things that might trigger our own judgments or defenses. The untrained mind reacts with argument and opposition, immediately beginning to build a wall. The trained mind, however, activates compassion. It asks the wise question, what pain, what fear, or what life experiences have led this person to believe this? What is the suffering that is driving their unskillful words or actions? We try to see the struggling human being behind the difficult opinion. This does not mean we have to agree with them or condone harmful views. It means we choose to connect with their humanity, rather than getting caught in a battle of ideas. This compassionate understanding is the strong, flexible material that allows us to walk across the bridge. The third and final plank is skillful speech, which is powered by wisdom. Having listened deeply and understood compassionately, it is now our turn to speak. But we do not just carelessly dump the contents of our own mind. We use our wisdom, our panna, to speak in a way that is most likely to maintain the connection we have built. This is the practice of right speech. It means we speak truthfully, but we also choose words that are kind and gentle. It means we speak at a time that is appropriate, when the other person is actually able to listen. It means we speak with the clear intention to heal, to clarify, and to connect, not with the intention to win, to dominate, or to prove ourselves right. Our wise and compassionate words become the strong handrails of the bridge, making the passage from one side to the other feel safe and inviting for both people. The true measure of a controlled, mastered mind is not found in its ability to achieve states of deep, solitary peace on a meditation cushion. That is only the training ground. The true measure is found in how that peace, clarity, and strength manifests in our interactions with the world. A mind that is truly free, naturally moves from a posture of self-protective defense to one of open, compassionate engagement. It stops seeing strangers and starts seeing fellow travelers. It stops building fortresses and starts building bridges. This is the greatest fruit of our practice. To take the freedom we have worked so hard to cultivate within ourselves and to use it as a force for healing, harmony, and connection in the world around us. When we have trained our mind to this extraordinary degree, where it is not only calm and focused, but also a reliable instrument for profound connection, its very nature seems to shift. It begins to exhibit a new set of stable and beautiful characteristics. It takes on the qualities of a mind that has been truly and skillfully tamed. We will now explore these radiant qualities. We have walked the path of the wise trainer, learning the compassionate arts of mind mastery. We began by honestly acknowledging the power of the wild elephant within, the untamed mind. We identified the three fires of greed, hatred, and delusion that fuel its destructive rampages. We learned to use the rope of mindfulness to create a space for observation and the sharpened axe of concentration to work with precision and power. We developed strategies for the mind's great challenges, from the explosive heat of anger to the sticky quicksand of sloth. We learned to use our intention as a compass and our focused awareness as a tool to build bridges of connection rather than walls of fear. After all of this patient, diligent, and compassionate training, a profound transformation begins to occur. The wild elephant is no longer wild. What does this tamed creature look like? What does it feel like to live with a mind that is no longer a chaotic and tyrannical master, but a calm, powerful, and loyal friend? This section is a deep exploration of the beautiful and potent qualities of a mind that has been skillfully controlled. The first and most foundational quality of a tamed mind is clarity. The untamed mind is like a lake caught in a constant storm, its surface whipped into a choppy, agitated frenzy by the winds of the five hindrances. The water is churned up with the mud of doubt and delusion, making it murky and opaque. Any reflection seen in this lake is distorted, fragmented, and completely unreliable. We look at our life through this agitated water and see a warped version of reality, a version colored by our fears, our cravings, and our judgments. This is why we so often react in unskillful ways. We are reacting to a distorted image that we mistake for the truth. The tamed mind, in contrast, is like that same lake on a perfectly calm and windless morning. The winds of the hindrances have ceased. The mud of delusion has settled. The water becomes perfectly still and astonishingly clear. Its surface, as smooth as glass, now reflects the world with perfect, unwavering fidelity. It reflects the sky, the mountains, and the trees exactly as they are, without adding a single ripple of its own. This is the quality of clarity, or vipassana. In practice, this means the mind sees reality without the immediate overlay of our conditioned interpretations. It is able to see a thought simply as a thought, a fleeting electrical impulse, or not as an undeniable command or a statement of ultimate truth. It is able to feel a difficult emotion, like sadness, as a pure energy in the body, without immediately weaving a tragic story around it. This profound clarity allows us to respond to life from a place of wisdom, not reactivity. We are no longer fighting with distorted reflections. We are engaging with the world as it truly is. From this clarity, the second quality naturally arises, a deep and unshakable peace. This peace, known as samatha, is not the dull, sleepy state of sloth, nor is it a fragile tranquility that depends on having a quiet room and no interruptions. It is a profound and resilient inner peace that comes from the cessation of our inner war. The untamed mind is in a constant state of civil war. It is the battle between what I want and what is. It is the friction between our desires and reality. This conflict is exhausting, and it is the source of all our stress and anxiety. The tamed mind, through its clarity, has come to understand the futility of this war. It has seen the impermanent nature of all things and is no longer desperately clinging to pleasure or violently resisting pain. It has accepted the flow of life. With this acceptance, the inner conflict ceases. The mind is no longer at war with itself. This is the true meaning of peace. It is the peace of the deep ocean, which remains profoundly still and silent, even as the surface is churned by a great storm. The external chaos of the world, the demands of work, the challenges of relationships, the noise of the city may continue, but the core of our being remains untouched, calm, and centered. This is not a state of being unfeeling. We still feel everything, but we are no longer thrown off balance by it. We have found the quiet, peaceful eye of life's hurricane. It is a common mistake to think that such a peaceful mind must be a weak or passive one. The third quality of the tamed mind reveals the opposite to be true. It is a mind of immense and quiet strength. The apparent strength of the untamed mind is the brittle, aggressive strength of the charging elephant. It is a strength born of fear and reactivity, and like a clenched fist, it is tense and unsustainable. It shatters easily in the face of real adversity, a harsh criticism, a significant failure, a profound loss. The tamed mind possesses a different kind of strength altogether. It is the quiet, resilient strength of the mountain. It is the strength to bear witness to our own pain and the pain of others without collapsing or turning away. It is the strength to remain true to our values of kindness and integrity, even when we are under pressure. It is the courage to admit when we are wrong and to apologize with sincerity. It is the profound endurance of patience, the ability to stay with a difficult process until it reaches its fruition. This is not the loud strength of a clenched fist, but the quiet, enduring strength of an open hand that is steady, firm, and ready to serve. Finally, this great strength is balanced by the fourth quality, a supple and intelligent flexibility. A mind that is merely strong can become rigid, dogmatic, and brittle. True mastery requires the ability to adapt, to yield, and to flow with the changing currents of life. This is the wisdom captured in the ancient parable of the oak tree and the reed. A mighty oak tree stood in a field, immensely proud of its size, its power, and its unbending rigidity. It looked down with contempt on the slender reeds growing by the riverbank, which bent and swayed with every small breeze. One day, a great typhoon swept through the land. The wind howled with incredible force. The mighty oak tree stood firm, resisting the wind with all its strength. It fought the storm. The slender reeds, however, did not fight. They simply yielded. They bent down almost to the ground, allowing the immense force of the wind to pass over them. When the storm finally passed, the proud and rigid oak tree lay on the ground, its massive trunk broken and its roots torn from the earth. The humble and flexible reeds simply stood up again, unharmed. The untamed mind is often like the oak tree. It is rigid in its views, I am right, and you are wrong. It is rigid in its plans. My life must unfold in exactly this way. It is rigid in its identity. This is who I am, and I cannot change. This very rigidity is what causes it to break when the inevitable storms of life arrive. The fully tamed mind has learned to embody the wisdom of both the oak and the reed. It has the deep, grounded, unshakable strength of the oak tree's root system. This is its core commitment to ethics, its equanimity, and its wisdom. But in its expression in the world, it has the supple, yielding flexibility of the reed. It can adapt to changing circumstances without panic. It can let go of a cherished view when presented with compelling new evidence. It can yield in a minor disagreement to preserve the harmony of a relationship. It can bend without breaking. This masterful blend of deep inner strength and graceful outer flexibility is the very hallmark of a liberated mind. This, then, in a portrait of the mind that has been brought under our gentle and compassionate control, it possesses the reflective clarity of a still lake, the deep and abiding peace of the silent ocean depths, the quiet, resilient strength of a great mountain, and the supple, intelligent flexibility of a reed in the wind. This is not some unattainable, superhuman state. It is the mind returned to its natural condition of health, balance, and harmony. It is the result of the patient, diligent training we have explored, the beautiful and powerful creature that the wild elephant becomes when it is finally, lovingly tamed. When we begin to live with a mind that possesses these beautiful qualities, our entire experience of life is transformed. The constant background hum of struggle, strain, and conflict falls away, and in its place, a new kind of happiness arises. Not a happiness that we must chase and grasp, but one that radiates effortlessly from within. We will now explore the profound and liberating joy that comes from true mental mastery. We have arrived at a remarkable point in our journey. We have looked upon the qualities of a mind that has been skillfully trained, a mind imbued with clarity, peace, strength, and flexibility. We have seen the image of the tamed elephant, now calm and powerful, walking peacefully beside its trainer. This raises a crucial question. What does it actually feel like to live this way? Our culture often associates discipline and control with a sense of grim, joyless austerity. We imagine that a person who has mastered their mind must be someone who is constantly saying no to life, who has suppressed all their passion and vitality. The profound secret of this path is that the exact opposite is true. The path of mental mastery is not a path of deprivation. It is the gateway to a form of happiness that is deeper, more stable, and more nourishing than anything we can experience while we are slaves to our untamed impulses. This is the joy of mastery, a multi-layered and authentic happiness that is the natural fruit of a mind that is finally free. The first and perhaps most immediate layer of this joy is the profound joy of unburdening. We are often unaware of the immense amount of energy we expend every single day in useless, painful, and repetitive mental activities. Imagine for a moment that you have been walking through your entire life with a heavy, invisible backpack strapped to your shoulders. In this backpack, you carry the heavy stones of past regrets and old grievances, constantly reopening old wounds. You carry the tangled, heavy chains of anxiety, endlessly playing out catastrophic future scenarios that will never happen. You carry the exhausting weight of social comparison, the constant need to measure up, to perform, and to manage the opinions of others. And you carry the dead weight of your inner critic, the relentless inner commentary that saps your confidence and drains your spirit. We are so accustomed to carrying this load that we have forgotten what it feels like to walk without it. The practice of controlling the mind, of learning to let go of the past, to not catastrophize about the future, to quiet the inner critic, and to release our attachments is the process of systematically removing these heavy stones from our backpack, one by one. The joy of mastery begins with the simple, astonishing relief of putting the weight down. It is the feeling a prisoner has on the day of their release. It is the deep sense of ease a patient feels when a chronic, lifelong fever finally breaks. We suddenly have access to a vast reservoir of mental and emotional energy that was previously being wasted. We don't realize how exhausted we were from the inner battle until the battle finally stops. This initial joy is one of immense and peaceful relief. Beyond this relief, a new and positive source of pleasure begins to arise from within. This is the joy of deep concentration. As we have discussed, The untrained mind is scattered and fragmented, constantly seeking small, fleeting pleasures from the external world to distract itself from its own agitation. But as we cultivate the mind through the practice of concentration, as we learn to keep it peacefully focused on a single object like the breath, the 5 hindrances begin to fall away. In the absence of craving, ill will, sloth, restlessness, and doubt, the mind's natural radiance begins to shine forth. This state is, in itself, profoundly pleasurable. The tradition describes 2 flavors of this meditative joy. First, a more energetic zest and rapture, known as piti, can arise, delightful tingling, or a sense of uplifting energy that is born of a mind free from its usual burdens. This then settles into a deeper, calmer, and more pervasive state of happiness and contentment, known as sukha. The revolutionary discovery here is that this is a purely mental pleasure, an all-pervading sense of well-being that is generated from within, completely independent of our 5 senses. We realize that we do not need to get anything from the outside world to feel happy. The mind, when calm and unified, has its own built-in source of profound nourishment. This discovery breaks the back of craving and addiction. Why would we frantically chase after the coarse, fleeting, and often problematic pleasures of the world when we have discovered an infinitely more refined, stable, and satisfying source of happiness within ourselves? It is like a person who has been surviving on stale crackers, suddenly discovering they have a gourmet chef living in their own kitchen. This leads us to the central metaphor for the joy of mastery, the experience of a master musician. Imagine a young person first learning to play a difficult instrument, like the violin. The initial process is one of pure struggle and frustration. Their fingers are clumsy on the strings, their posture is awkward, and the bow scrapes and screeches, producing a sound that is painful to the ear. They have to think consciously and laboriously about every single note, every movement. The process is one of constant effort, and the result is disharmony. This is a perfect image of the untrained mind trying to navigate the complexities of life. Our efforts are clumsy, we create a lot of inner noise and suffering, and the process feels like a frustrating struggle. Now, picture a world-renowned virtuoso walking onto the stage. They pick up their violin, and it seems to melt into their body, a seamless extension of their own being. They are not struggling, their movements are fluid, economical, and filled with a graceful confidence. There is no gap between their musical intention and the sublime notes that pour forth from the instrument. Of course, the music they create is a source of immense joy for the audience. But the deepest joy in that concert hall is the one being experienced by the musician herself. It is the joy of complete and effortless mastery. It is the freedom that exists within a lifetime of discipline. It is the exhilaration of having such perfect control over her instrument that she can now forget the technique entirely and simply allow the music of her soul to flow through it. She can improvise, play with passion, and express the deepest nuances of human emotion because the instrument has become her willing and responsive partner. To master the mind is to become this musician. Our life, with all its relationships, challenges, and opportunities, is our instrument. Through the patient, daily practice of training our attention and cultivating wholesome qualities, we move from being a clumsy beginner to a skillful virtuoso. The joy of mastery is this inner feeling of freedom and grace. It is the ability to play the instrument of our life with skill, to respond to its challenges not with screeching reactivity, but with a beautiful and harmonious melody of wisdom and compassion. Finally, this profound inner joy gives rise to a new kind of confidence. It is not the brittle, arrogant confidence of the ego, which is based on external accomplishments or the opinions of others. It is a quiet, deep, and unshakable confidence that comes from genuine self-knowledge. It is the confidence of the master trainer who is no longer afraid of their elephant because they have come to understand it and trust it. It is the confidence of the sea captain who does not fear the storm because they have complete faith in their ability to navigate it. The person with a mastered mind develops what is known as the lion's roar, a deep, inner fearlessness that comes not from a belief that nothing bad will ever happen, but from the certain knowledge that they possess the inner resources to handle whatever happens with grace and wisdom. The path of controlling the mind, a path that may have begun with a sense of grim determination and discipline, ultimately blossoms into a life of profound and unexpected joy. It is a joy born of unburdening, a joy that flows from the deep wellspring of a concentrated mind, the exhilarating joy of skillful expression, and the quiet, fearless confidence of a lion. It is the ultimate proof that the demanding work of inner cultivation is not a rejection of happiness, but the only path that leads to a happiness that is true, lasting, and real. This profound joy and confidence changes our very relationship to the mind itself. The process that began as a struggle for control over a wild and dangerous animal now evolves into something much more intimate, respectful, and beautiful. We begin to see that this powerful entity is not something to be dominated, but something to be befriended. We have explored the profound and unexpected joy that arises from a mastered minder, joy born not of getting, but of letting go, a joy rooted in the stability and clarity of our own consciousness. This experience of authentic inner happiness signals a fundamental shift in our entire relationship with ourselves. The language we used to begin this journey, the language of control, of taming a wild animal, of mastering a chaotic force, was necessary and appropriate for the early stages of practice. When we are being dragged by the untamed elephant of the mind, the situation truly feels like a battle that must be won. But this adversarial language, while useful, is provisional. It is a raft we use to cross a turbulent river. As our practice matures, as our wisdom deepens, and our compassion blossoms, we find that we can leave that raft behind. The dynamic of our inner life evolves from a struggle for control into a beautiful and harmonious partnership. This section is about this sacred evolution, the journey from seeing the mind as an adversary to be conquered, to recognizing it as our most loyal, powerful, and trustworthy companion. In the beginning, the practice of training the mind often does feel like a war. We are locked in a struggle with a lifetime of deeply ingrained habits. We feel the immense gravitational pull of our cravings. We feel the explosive, volcanic force of our anger. We wrestle daily with the thick fog of sloth and the frantic storms of anxiety. Our efforts to stay present with the breath are constantly thwarted. In this phase, we need the spirit of a patient and determined warrior. We need discipline, resolve, and the willingness to engage directly with these difficult energies. It is very easy to get stuck in this warrior mindset, to see our practice as an endless and grim battle against the perceived flaws of our own mind. But as we persist, something remarkable begins to change, not just in the mind's behavior, but in our attitude toward it. Through the consistent practice of mindfulness, our capacity for clear seeing grows stronger. We begin to see the processes of the mind more objectively. Simultaneously, through the cultivation of loving kindness, our compassion begins to grow. We start to understand why the mind behaves as it does. We see that its frantic chasing after pleasure is a misguided search for happiness. We see that its angry lashing out is a symptom of its own underlying pain and fear. We see its confusion and its suffering. With this understanding, our intention naturally shifts. We no longer want to defeat the mind. We want to heal it. We no longer want to break the elephant. We want to free it from the thorns that are causing it so much pain. This is the great turning point where the relationship transforms from a battle into a dance. A battle is about opposition, force, and domination. A dance is about partnership, sensitivity, responsiveness, and moving together in harmony. We learn when to lead and when to follow, when to be firm and when to be gentle. We learn to guide the mind's immense energy rather than just trying to block it. The clumsy, exhausting struggle for control gives way to a graceful and joyful cooperation. Let us revisit, for one final time, our central parable of the elephant and its trainer. Imagine them now, years after the initial taming process. The thick ropes and the sturdy post are long gone. The elephant is not chained or coerced in any way. It stands calmly beside the trainer, connected not by force, but by a deep and unbreakable bond of mutual trust and affection. The trainer no longer needs to shout commands or use a sharp goad. A quiet word, a gentle touch on the elephant's side, or even just a subtle shift in gaze is enough to communicate his intention, and the elephant responds willingly, intelligently, and peacefully. Their relationship is a perfect, harmonious collaboration. The trainer, with his human intellect, provides the higher-level wisdom, the long-term vision, and the ethical direction. The elephant, in turn, offers its incredible strength, its unwavering endurance, its groundedness, and its own form of deep, instinctual intelligence. The trainer might point toward a great log that needs to be moved, and the elephant, understanding the task, will apply its power to accomplish it. The elephant, with its sensitive hearing and keen sense of smell, might detect a danger hidden in the jungle long before the trainer is aware of it, and will alert him with a low, gentle rumble. They are a team, each respecting and relying on the unique strengths of the other. This is the beautiful and powerful image of our new relationship with our own mind. We are the trainer, the source of wise intention and compassionate guidance. The tamed mind is our magnificent elephant, now peaceful and cooperative. We can now trust our mind. We can ask it to perform a complex task, and it will apply its power of focus and creativity to that task without being constantly distracted. We can rely on it to remember important information. Its immense energy is no longer a source of chaos, but a powerful and reliable resource at our complete disposal, ready to serve our highest values. One of the most profound fruits of this new partnership is the emergence of a trustworthy, intuitive wisdom. When the mind was a loud, chaotic jungle of competing thoughts and raging emotions, it was impossible to hear its subtler signals. Any feeling that arose was likely to be just a disguised form of greed or fear. But when the mind has become quiet, clear, and settled, a deeper intelligence can begin to emerge. This is not some mystical, magical power. It is the natural wisdom of a calm and embodied nervous system. A quiet mind can process vast amounts of subtle information from our environment and our past experiences on a subconscious level, synthesizing it into a gut feeling or a clear sense of rightness about a particular course of action. It is the difference between trying to hear a delicate whisper in the middle of a noisy, crowded factory and hearing that same whisper in the profound silence of a library at midnight. Learning to trust this quiet, intuitive voice of a purified mind is a key aspect of this new partnership. We move from a state of constant self-doubt and inner conflict to a state of deep trust in our own inner guidance system. The entire path of controlling the mind is, in the end, a journey toward a state where forceful, effortful control is no longer the primary mode of operating. The initial struggle for mastery gives way to a relationship of loving, respectful, and joyful collaboration. The mind, which once seemed to be our worst enemy, a wild animal to be feared, or a faulty, frustrating tool to be cursed, is revealed to be our closest and most intimate friend. It becomes our powerful ally in navigating the world and our loyal companion on the path to final liberation. It is no longer an obstacle to our happiness, but becomes the very instrument through which our deepest wisdom and our most boundless compassion can be beautifully and effectively expressed in the world. This perfect partnership, this seamless collaboration between our wise intention and the mind's powerful, purified energy, points toward a state of ultimate and effortless freedom. It is a life lived without inner conflict, a state where our actions flow spontaneously and skillfully from a place of deep clarity and peace. This is the very heart of liberation, the final summit of our journey. We have come to the final stage of our exploration, the very summit of the mountain we set out to climb. We began with a mind that was a wild elephant, a chaotic force that dragged us through lives of turmoil. Through patient and compassionate training, we have seen how this mind can be tamed, befriended, and transformed into a powerful and loyal companion. This partnership, this seamless collaboration between our deepest wisdom and the mind's focused energy, points toward a state of ultimate freedom and effortless grace. This is the pinnacle of what it means to control the mind. In the Buddhist tradition, this ultimate, unshakable liberation is known as nibbana, or nirvana. It is not a place we go to after we die, nor is it a state of empty nothingness. It is the living, breathing reality of a mind that has been so completely mastered that it is, at last, utterly and unconditionally free. It is the final extinguishing of suffering and its causes, right here, in this very life. This liberation is defined by what is absent. It is freedom from the tyranny of the three fires. Let us imagine what that is truly like. Imagine a life free from the burning fire of greed. This does not mean a life without pleasure or enjoyment. It means a life without the desperate, painful thirst for pleasure. It is the ability to savor a delicious meal, to appreciate a beautiful piece of music, or to enjoy the warmth of companionship with your full, present attention, and then to let it go when it is over, without a trace of clinging or regret. It is a profound and stable contentment that does not depend on getting the next thing. The endless, exhausting search for happiness outside of yourself has come to a complete end because you have discovered the wellspring of well-being within. The mind is no longer a hungry ghost, but a rich and benevolent king, content with his own vast inner kingdom. Imagine a life free from the corrosive fire of hatred. This does not mean you become a passive doormat or that you lose your sense of justice. It means you are free from the poison of ill will, resentment, and anger in your own heart. It is the capacity to meet unpleasantness, conflict, and even the cruelty of others with a calm, clear, and compassionate mind. When faced with injustice, you are moved to act not by blind rage, but by a clear-seeing compassion. When faced with personal insults, you are not wounded, because there is no inflated ego to defend. The constant, draining inner warfare against reality has ceased. The energy that was once wasted on fighting the world is now liberated for the purpose of loving and serving it. And most fundamentally, imagine a life free from the suffocating smoke of delusion. This is the bedrock of all other freedoms. It is the stable, continuous, and direct seeing of reality as it truly is. A dynamic, interconnected, and selfless flow. The mistaken belief in a solid, separate me has dissolved, and with it, the entire project of feeding and defending that self has collapsed. The frantic need to acquire things for me, greed, and to protect me from threats, hatred, simply has no ground to stand on. When the delusion is gone, the other two fires have no fuel. They are naturally, effortlessly extinguished. This state of liberation gives rise to a beautiful paradox concerning the nature of control. The word control can imply a sense of tightness, of constant effort, of vigilant, white-knuckled self-suppression. And indeed, the early stages of the path can feel this way. But the ultimate state of mastery is, paradoxically, one of complete effortlessness. Think again of the master musician. In the beginning, she had to consciously control every finger placement, every movement of the bow. Her mind was filled with effortful technique. But now, as a virtuoso, she no longer needs to control her playing in this way. The years of disciplined practice have become so deeply absorbed into her being that her hands move with a spontaneous, intuitive, and perfect grace. There is no longer a sense of a controller, separate from the controlled. The music simply flows through her. The mastery is so complete that it has become second nature, a state of relaxed and joyful flow. So it is with the liberated mind. A person in this state does not feel like they are constantly controlling their thoughts and emotions. The wholesome qualities of mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion have become their new default setting. They are kind not because they are forcing themselves to be, but because kindness is now the most natural expression of their being. They are peaceful not because they are suppressing turmoil, but because the causes of turmoil have been uprooted. The long and arduous struggle is over. What remains is a state of relaxed, responsive, and spontaneous right action, a perfect and harmonious dance with life. The classic symbol for this state of being is the most beautiful in all of Buddhist iconography, the lotus flower. The lotus begins its life in the dark, murky, and nutrient, poor mud at the bottom of a pond. This mud represents the messy, confusing, and painful conditions of our ordinary human existence. It is the world of the three fires, the world of suffering. Yet, the seed of awakening is present even in this mud. Driven by its nature, the lotus sends a stem upwards, journeying through the cloudy, indistinct water. This long journey through the water represents the spiritual path itself. All the discipline, the practice, the patient effort of taming the mind and purifying the heart. Finally, the bud emerges from the cloudy water and opens its petals into the clear air and the bright sunlight. The lotus flower, in its full bloom, is immaculately beautiful, pristine, and fragrant. And here is the great miracle. Though it has grown up from the mud, its petals are completely unstained by the mud. This is the image of the liberated mind. A person who has mastered their mind continues to live in the messy, imperfect world, the world of traffic jams, difficult people, sickness, and loss. They do not escape it, but they are no longer stained by it. They can be in the midst of conflict without hatred arising in their heart. They can be surrounded by the temptations of consumer culture without craving arising in their mind. They have taken the very mud of their own suffering and used it as the necessary nutrient to produce a flower of sublime wisdom, compassion, and beauty. This is the ultimate freedom, not an escape from the world, but the ability to live in it with a transcendent and undefiled purity. The pinnacle of controlling the mind, therefore, is the realization that there is no longer a struggling controller and a rebellious thing to be controlled. The trainer and the elephant have become one. It is the end of all inner division and the beginning of a life of integrated, harmonious flow. It is the discovery that the freedom we sought was not something to be built or achieved, but our own true nature, waiting to be uncovered. The wild elephant has not just been tamed into submission, it has been liberated to reveal its true identity as a perfectly awakened, wise, and compassionate being. We have now traced the entire arc of this profound training, from the initial chaos of the untamed mind to the serene and powerful freedom of the fully mastered heart. The map of the journey has been laid out before us. Let us now take a final look back at the path we have traveled and distill the essential wisdom that can guide us from this day forward. Our journey began with a familiar image, a person holding a leash, being pulled uncontrollably through the world by a powerful, impulsive animal. That animal, we came to see, was a metaphor for our own untamed mind. From there, we embarked on a great adventure of inner transformation, the path of the wise and compassionate trainer. We looked squarely at the magnificent and terrifying power of the wild elephant within us. We identified the three fires of greed, hatred, and delusion that fuel its destructive rampages. We then began the patient work of taming, picking up the essential tools for the task. We learned to use the strong rope of mindfulness to create a space for observation and the sharp axe of concentration to work with precision and strength. We developed skillful strategies to handle the mind's most difficult states, the fires of anger, the floods of desire, the fogs of sloth, and the storms of anxiety. We learned to fire the inner critic, to direct our attention with purpose, and to reframe our perception of the world. Through this dedicated practice, we saw the relationship evolve from a struggle for dominance into a beautiful and harmonious partnership, transforming our most feared adversary into our most loyal companion, capable of a profound and unshakable freedom. Now, as we stand at the end of this exploration, we can distill the entire journey down to its essential, life-altering message. The phrase, "control your mind, or it will control you," is not a call for a cold and rigid self-suppression. It is not an invitation to become unfeeling, robotic, or disconnected from the vibrant energies of life. It is something far deeper and more compassionate. The ultimate purpose of controlling the mind is to skillfully and lovingly transform it from a chaotic, tyrannical master into a powerful, clear, and devoted servant, so that your deepest wisdom and your most authentic heart, the true charioteer, can finally take the reins and guide your life. To live without this mastery is to be a slave to every passing impulse, every dark mood, every fearful thought. To live with it is to be truly free. It is the difference between a life of chaotic reaction and a life of conscious, purposeful creation. This path of inner mastery is not a secret doctrine reserved for saints or sages in ancient times. It is the birthright and the potential of every human being. The training ground is not a distant monastery. It is your own daily life. The tools are not mysterious. They are as close as your own body and breath. The journey does not begin at some future date when you are ready. It begins now. It begins with the very next conscious breath you take. That is the first gentle tug on the leash. It begins with the next time you notice anger and choose not to add a story to it. It begins the next time you feel worry and choose to feel your feet on the floor. In every moment, you are presented with a choice. Will you be dragged by the untamed mind, or will you be its calm, compassionate guide? The power to become the master of your own inner world, to live a life of profound peace and freedom, resides within you, waiting patiently to be cultivated. The choice, always, is yours.